Welcome to the HBTVS podcast. I'm your host, William, and joining me today will be Derek.
Hello.
And Sean.
Hello. You were already breaking up, of course. Everything's been fine, and that was a little modulated. So,
well, from my end, it's fine. So, we're back to recording these digitally, or continuing that trend. But on this episode of the HBTVS podcast, we'll touch on some recent news in the world and the world of film, and then go into things we've been watching and recommending, because in this period of time, there's very little new stuff hitting theaters. In fact, nothing is hitting theaters aside from like small specialty stuff. Because drive-in theaters, was it Jurassic Park and some like classic films have been in the top 10 in the past few weeks.
Yeah.
Jaws.
That's pretty awesome.
Spielberg had back-to-back box offices. And doesn't he have a film out this year?
Yeah, there's all kinds of stuff going on, but there's there's stuff hitting streaming and stuff we have caught up on, so we can kind of go through stuff we'd recommend people check out. Yeah, but before we get into all that, so we're releasing this one a little bit off schedule. So the initial plan was for the monthly releases to release them at the beginning of each month, typically the first Tuesday of each month. But of course, this month in June, in the beginning of the month, there was a lot of strife going on across the United States and the world.
I mean, it hasn't stopped. But
yeah, it was.
We all live in Louisville, so obviously, I'm sure most people have heard of what's I want to say her name,
Breonna Taylor.
Breonna Taylor,
or so Breonna Taylor.
Yeah, when it comes to Breonna, but that is still going on. They're still protesting.
Well, and too, I didn't mean to make it sound like it's over. It's just a lot of protest had started around the country. And then some of those early protests, like in Minneapolis and here in Louisville and in other places, had some violence that occurred. And it was just a huge topic of conversation. And with everything that was going on in the world, we're just like, we had a quick chat. Like, so do we want to do the movie podcast during the middle of this very important time in history? And it's like, man, we can wait for a while. We can hold it off for a little bit.
Yeah. And again, it's still not over. And, I hope it's not over until action is taken that a lot of people are satisfied with, but like just last night in Louisville, there was a shooting, at ours. It seemed, I don't want to debate. I don't want to make any assumptions about mental health or anything, but it was, somebody came in with a gun and shot I think he was an aspiring photographer, journalist. His godfather was a columnist at Courier Journal. And he died, he passed away, and somebody else was shot down there as well. So yeah, I mean, it's,
yeah, it's just something where there's a lot of uncomfortable stuff going on in the country, people having to kind of address things, the way they are, the way that they have been, and say, is this the way it should be? So there's a lot of those conversations, and that's in the middle of still being in the pandemic, where the number of people or the number of coronavirus cases are going up through the roof every day and hitting new highs in Florida and stuff. So, in these more populated places that kind of open things up. So there's just a lot of stuff going on, and there's all the discussion about policing and the way the law is enforced and a lot of stuff. So we were like, well, during the middle of all this conversation, which is still ongoing and still very important, at the beginning of it, when all that was like dominating the news cycle and everybody was talking about it, we're like, maybe this isn't the best time to release a podcast talking about horror movies. I know people need a release, and
yeah, it's just, yeah, I mean, it was, I wasn't watching anything, and I still haven't watched a lot, but, it's just constantly sticking, paying attention to what's going on and trying to learn as much as you can.
Well,
yeah,
one thing I've watched, and this has been consistently, I guess it's almost kind of like a comfort food at this point, is Unsolved Mysteries, the Robert Stack. And it's funny to me to go watch these things that happen. These cases go from the, let's just say, at least from the 40s to early 2000s, and you can see the incompetencies of the policing system in those cases. So the interesting thing is how reform can be in so many ways, and it's as relevant in a show like that quit running in the early 2000s, started in the late 80s, as it is now, and how many of these cases were bungled or just there was a lack of care from the police force. So, and as me as a true crime person who loves listening to true crime and reading a lot of that stuff, and you can see so many times where, and you would hope that things have gotten better over time, but people go missing or people are gone for a long period of time and they just don't care. And it's just one of those things where you're like, oh, okay, well, that's in the 80s, but we're in the 2020s and you still see that. And I think that's something that people should take in consideration and look at when all this stuff is going on, because while you might not agree with everything, there are so many things that are still going on today on that level of a police force that you can point at, like, well, nothing's changed over 40 years.
I mean, I think too, something that people overlook is a lot of jobs. So think about non-public sector jobs. Think about, a sales job or somebody that works at a gas or an oil change place. They're based on sales and they're based on numbers, and they have to hit certain numbers and targets. That's why when you go get your oil change, you try to sell you windshield wipers and all kinds of other crap you don't need. And police departments, a lot of times, is closing cases. So a lot of times they will take the very easy, obvious answer and not investigate further to make sure it's the correct answer. And it's just one of those things where, doctors, in every career field, there's people who are the bottom of the field.
Yeah, coroners. I mean, you have coroners that look at stuff. And, if anybody's a true crime buff, you look at the Boys on the Track. If that was a case where a coroner was very inept, and his ineptitude, he ruled like the death is accidental and not a homicide. And are you all familiar with Boys on the Track at all?
No.
Okay, just a brief overview. Boys on the Track is if you're a Hillary Clinton conspiracy theorist, a lot of people know about it because they believe that she killed them. But there's two boys, I think it was in Oklahoma, or where was Bill Clinton the governor of? Was
Arkansas?
Oklahoma? No, sorry, Arkansas. Happened in Arkansas in the early 90s, where two boys were essentially murdered and placed on a track for the train tracks, and a train ran over them. And like the coroner had ruled that they had smoked so much marijuana that they were just passed out on the tracks and couldn't hear the train coming. And essentially kind of what it came down to was they believed that the kids had stumbled on like a drug trade that was going on, and they were murdered and placed on the tracks to make it look accidental. But you even had the coroner who was like very inept and obviously lied about the level of marijuana, because most people have probably smoked weed, or some of them do have listened to this podcast. And in order for you to smoke so much to pass out in the train tracks, and it's not how it works. Yeah, it's not how it works. So you can just look at that and just see levels of ineptitude on everything. And that's why I'm not necessarily against reform. And that's why I think because in my line of work, I'm a public servant and my stuff is always talked about. So it's like, I'm not against it, but I do think it's an interesting conversation that needs to be had.
Well, I mean, William, to your point about hitting numbers, though, you forget these police forces, they have to hit their numbers. And because of that, it changes their policing and profiling. And, there was so much.
That's why they set up the roadblocks, and they'll do the radar traps, and and they'll do the sobriety field checks. And even though they don't get a lot of people, they can still get a few arrests, even if it's kind of trumped up for whatever it should be.
It's also just, a lot of times policing Black communities and going hard. There was in New York, there was a whole precinct in New York, I think, that got busted because they had their numbers. There was, I think, some officers thankfully outed them, I believe, but it was just like this big thing with the entire police force, or that entire precinct, and the way they tried to get their numbers up and the way they profiled and arrested people. And it was just like a huge thing. Like,
those guys,
there's so many failings on, just having to hit numbers, which is ridiculous in policing. Like, I understand you want your officers working, but that is terrible. Like, hit your numbers. Like, no, there shouldn't be. You should have to meet a quota on, charging people for, these bomb ass crimes.
Well, and two, like, people speed every single day. Every single place you drive, someone's speeding. What is the differentiator between them pulling over, somebody for going 5 miles over versus 6 or 4? Like, it's very arbitrary. One too, like in Baltimore, there was the cops that got caught where they had the BB guns or the toy guns that looked real that they had just in case they shot somebody, they could plant it. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I think
there's a million stories like that. You know what I mean? You could go on you could sit there and just like do a live stream for a week. You know what I mean?
And too, I think like anybody who's worked in any job that's ever had to work with HR when it comes to a problem between employees or, being a whistleblower, oftentimes HR, especially like in unionized jobs and stuff, it's not your friend when you whistleblow or you bring something to people's attention about someone who is acting, incorrectly or breaking rules or laws. A lot of times, the only thing they're caring about is legal liability, and the person who brings up the issue is the one who gets booted out and shunned and turned away from and has to leave the career field, and the person who is doing the stuff gets protected. And that's just the way it is in a lot of career fields, unfortunately, and that needs to be gone.
It's just there to mitigate. It's just to mediate and try to calm down the employee enough to get them either out the door or to not press charges. Their HR is there to protect the companies most of the time.
Again, like me being a huge true crime person, like there's so many cases whereas prosecutors also have numbers they have to hit. So there's a lot of times, are you aware of the Innocence Project? You know what that is?
Yes.
Okay. So like a lot of the podcasts I listen to are very big advocates of the Innocence Project, and that's a really interesting look at because there's a lot of cases and even ones recent and from the history where it's like they zero in on one person. And it's just because it's an easy person, but there's really it might be purely circumstantial evidence. And by circumstantial, it could be the most literal definition of circumstantial that would typically not stand up, but they go after that, get the person jailed, because prosecutors also have numbers too. So you look at it, and it's not just an issue from a policing standpoint. There's issues everywhere, and again, you're not picking on them and saying that they're all bad because that's not what you're saying. But if you have one person in one place that's not doing their job, and you have a bunch of people that look the other way, and then you allow these things to happen, that's an issue. And I think that's why, like me watching, and I'm not saying me in particular, but watching stuff like Unsolved Mysteries or listening to true crime, you can see these things, and to see that it hasn't changed in so long is what's kind of alarming. That people whistleblow and then maybe a cop goes missing, or
well, if you're from,
that's happened so many times.
If you're from Kentucky, look into what happened in Bardstown, Kentucky, where a cop got killed, a woman got killed, her dad, who was leading the rescue efforts to try to find her, got killed in a very suspicious hunting accident, and other people got killed. So
I covered a lot of that when I was working in news. Like I was working the entire time at the height of that. Unfortunately, I don't know what's going on much with it now because the dad was fighting for it. He was a hunting trip and he got shot in the back or whatever.
He basically got sniped in an open field while he was on a hunting trip.
Yeah, and I met with him several times. I talked to him and was out there with him, and they were searching and stuff. Like it was, that community is just. And before that, it was the Netherlands case. I was there on that scene that day, which is like, did they know something locally? It's just terrible. And none of that stuff was solved.
Still is
none of them.
Yeah, so I mean, I think kind of in general, just anybody that looks at the way the world is and says there's no problem here, obviously isn't digging deep enough. And it's not saying that everybody who's in those professions is out to do bad, because they're not. It's just the systems themselves need to be set up where you can more easily identify the bad actors and get them out, and have a framework in place where you hold people accountable and you get rid of policies that are very detrimental to very specific communities. And people shouldn't be doing chokeholds and putting their knees on people.
And so our police chief Conrad, he was out at, he said he was going to retire, and then David, I can't remember how to pronounce his name, McTee, barbecue man here locally, who was also killed. He was, people may have heard of that, where they were out barbecuing, National Guard came down. Apparently National Guard was told not to go down to the West End. Some of these police officers know the community. They know who's chill and maybe what to look after. They at least know who's chill most of the time. But National Guard went down there, shooting happened. He ended up dead. What was my point about this? What did I start talking about? Sorry, I started thinking about him and that whole terrible mess that. Because Louisville has been. Yeah, it's just
because people were protesting in the downtown region, and they had said they had set a curfew, and they were trying to enforce the curfew, and then essentially the area where that shooting and that incident occurred was, a good few miles from where the actual protesting was.
Oh yeah, they were hanging out there. I went to one of the protests one day, and then I have a 2-year-old. It's hard to get away with her with COVID and everything. We're actually self-isolating right now because somebody at Nicole's work got diagnosed with it. But we went down there one day to it, and we drove. It's in the West End. The protest in our city. They're camping out across the street from the mayor's office.
Well, they're roughly around like 5th and 6th Street, and this would be on 26th Street. So
yes, yeah.
A 5-minute to 10-minute car drive, from where the protests are occurring. So
yeah, and people were hanging out there, socializing. I'm sure decompressing after everything's going on. A lot of them were in the property. I don't know. There were people probably spread out everywhere, but he was on his property. You know what I mean? Grilling out
in his
place of business, and they kind of were having a little party. But my point was, the reason I brought that up was Conrad. Anyway, he's gone now, but I went to several meetings in the West End, which is predominantly black. I think we're the 4th most segregated city in the U.S. I saw.
Yeah, it's up there.
9th Street. It's the 9th Street divide. Hunter S. Thompson wrote a article about that, about how the city became segregated. I think it's called A Southern City with Northern Problems. He gives like a good breakdown of that and how that all happened. But
the thing is, you think about that too. Like whenever he would have wrote that, would have been a while ago, and it's not any different.
50s. Yeah, that it was specifically how the segregation occurred in the 50s and 60s or whatever, and who made those decisions. Like there was basically this upper class society or club that still exists. I'm sure it's not the same exact thing, but it's very fascinating. It's a great read. But anyway, going to several meetings down there in our West End about police brutality, and the ways of policing and stuff. Conrad, even though he's ousted, people are glad he is out now. He brought up some points that I agreed with. I mean, one, he always talked about, he at least was transparent saying there's inherent racism, within his officers as well, where it is inherent biases and profiling and all that. And that was needed to be fixed. But he also talked about the way they tackled crime, and the thing he always said, I heard him say at times, and this could have been what he was saying. But you're not going to arrest your way out of this problem of poverty and all that. Like, and I totally agree. Like, that's where all this allocation of police funds that keep ballooning. Even the guy that shot somebody downtown last night, like he was a homeless man. Maybe he had mental issues. Maybe he didn't. I'm not making any assumption on that.
A ton of information.
I've heard some people mention that have been down there on the scene that I know personally. But I'm. Regardless of that, he was homeless. And again, like if we have more money resources going towards that fixes the root. It's like we're waiting for the tree to rot. And sometimes it's not even a rotten tree. It is just a tree that looks like another, you know what I mean?
It's just
profiling or
but
whatever.
Then the greater question is, how does a homeless individual who probably has zero to no funds get a firearm?
Well, that has to do with too many guns available.
That's an American thing, because I don't know how many international listeners we have, but like in America, you can pretty much go anywhere and just find a bucket of guns and buy one.
He left. He came back with a gun. So
who knows how that went down.
Regardless, let's hope these protests don't stop until major change is happening across cities all across America.
Yeah, and simply, changing the name of a street or something, that's not what people want. They want actual systematic change at the local level in terms of how these police departments are handling things.
They don't want politicians to wear tashikis for whatever purposes to get their own glory, and then the next day pass policy that doesn't help.
But
and again, my whole thing is do not worship politicians or whatever. You can follow the ones that carry your beliefs. but follow those beliefs. Don't follow whatever the one politician's saying, you know. And I think that's
exactly
the smart people that I follow. And even if I'm not up on everything, like I try to get educated as much as I can, but I follow and pay attention and take the advice of people who I think are steadfast in their perspective, not a specific politician or just going one way for a specific reason. I saw somebody I know, you know, she's a black girl, and there was a specific prominent black politician that not Charles Booker, but that I thought seems to be doing really well. And she was basically like, I don't believe that he is totally for the emancipation and progress of all black people. I don't know if she, you know, I'm guessing she means LGBTQ. I'm not for sure, but again, she mentioned that, and that's the first ill word I've heard of him. And so I'm like, okay, you know, I've been meaning to reach out to her. I don't know her that well personally. She was at U of L, but you know what I mean? Like, okay, I now need to talk to her and see where her perspective is.
Well, like something
I followed her, you know.
Something I saw before we, you know, can get in here, but like something I saw Ice-T say, because he was criticizing some politicians, and somebody was, you know, so he was criticizing the president, our current president Trump, and then somebody was like, yeah, vote for Biden. He's like, hold up. He's like, no Biden this or Biden that. He's like, Democrats, Republicans, same bird, different feather. And it's like, that's not wrong. So, you know, go for your ideals versus personalities, but
they all go golf together on the weekend.
Somebody said, do Tom and Jerry hate each other? Did you see this analogy?
Yeah.
It said, does Tom and Jerry hate each other? Yeah. No, Jerry pretends, or Tom pretends to hate Jerry. So that way his owner doesn't get another cat that will kill Jerry. They're secretly like best friends. And somebody said, well, that's just the Republicans and Democrats. That
kind of reminds me of
too many of them.
Yeah. But if you're very familiar with the Looney Tunes, there's the sheepdog and Wile E. Coyote. And in certain cartoons, they would be like, hey, how's it going? They'd be drinking their morning coffee, and they'd punch in, and then they'd go after each other. And at the end of the day, they punch out and they go hang out. And that's politics. You know, they do their punching in and they do their punching out.
Yeah, so I'm sorry if you don't have other friends. One other thing, I thought you were going to make what Ice-T said about mask. He said,
oh, no, I was just...
At this point, not wearing a mask is an IQ test, or if you know, if you wear a mask, that's an IQ test.
well, like if you see all the meltdown videos, but
here's the thing about, just to get on masks real quick, because I'm a skilled laborer, so I have to work on stuff that may or may not contain asbestos. It's not supposed to anymore. I primarily work on big diesel vehicles, and we have brakes that, you know, nothing uses asbestos anymore. But as a precaution, I'll wear a mask when I'm doing the brake jobs and wash them down and stuff, and just different things. So like when people freak out about the mask, it doesn't compute to me, because it's like I value my lungs and being around for a long time, and I'll wear these masks while I'm doing like labor-intensive things.
Yeah.
So I'm swinging a 5-pound sledgehammer to knock brake drums off that weigh like 150. Like, so it doesn't compute to me that there's like people see this manliness issue with the mask, because it's like,
and it's a courtesy, you know?
Yeah.
It's just a courtesy to the other person.
But like, to me, it doesn't compute, because I'm like, okay, I'm doing this hard labor intensive job, and I'm also wearing a mask to protect myself. So when I go out in public and I go to Kroger, you know, if you're in whatever region that has Kroger's, or like I also collect toys and stuff. I went to a couple of places where there's older individuals own the stores, and out of respect for them, they want you to wear one. And it's like, what's the big deal? You wear it for 5-10 minutes.
And the thing too is, I don't want to see people complaining about wearing masks now, wearing a full face Halloween mask for hours and hours, and saying, because the people who are like, oh, because of the ADA and I can't wear a mask, and HIPAA says I don't have to tell you why. It's like, well, that's not how the law works. And two, I saw pictures of you wearing Halloween mask for 12 hours straight a few months ago. So don't give me that.
As they said, like, it's not even mandated in Japan, and somebody posted a video and just everybody's wearing them just going down the street. Like, it's not even mandated. Like, and it's like, dude, it's just like courtesy. Americans are so...
Well, because Asian countries have dealt with these types of respiratory illnesses so much that it's nothing new to them. Well, and like I follow a bunch of different wrestling things, and some of the wrestling things I follow are mainly like Japanese. So like I've been following them for a long time, and they always have the mask on for different flu outbreaks and whatever.
Well, and two,
so it's
with
something they're used to it.
With some of the independent wrestling stuff around here, I'd wear a mask at those venues regardless of the coronavirus. But yes, I guess we can...
one other thing. I think I said emancipation earlier. I think I meant liberation. I was as soon as I said it, I was like, I meant sorry. I was like, sorry.
yeah.
I was trying to keep my thoughts straight.
Yeah, so we can move into movies news and stuff now.
More good news.
There's no news.
Yeah, so the thing is,
Tenet got pushed back for the third time. So.
It's like kind of they're playing like a House of Cards game with Tenet and its release date because they keep moving it back like a week or two every other week. But regardless of whether stuff comes out soon, that has allowed a few people to play games at the box office. Because there was an instance where there was an indie film or a short film called Unsubscribe, where the people who made it, they shot it over Zoom over 1 week, and it was the number one film at the U.S. box office on June 10th because they found a loophole that they were able to rent out, so you can four-wall a theater. That's you go to like a theater and you rent out the entire auditorium and you sell the tickets and you're responsible for making or losing any money off of it. So they made a short film and then they released it like that. And because of the way they handled it, they're able to be the number one movie in America for that day because there's almost nothing else in theaters.
They bought all the tickets, but then all the ticket sales went back to them. So they were only out whatever they paid to rent it.
So you can have like this marketing ploy. Because I think you can rent it on Vimeo on demand or something if you just search for Unsubscribed short film. But by doing this kind of publicity stunt, they get to say they've had a number one box office grossing movie, which even pretty well-known auteurs have not done that. Like, I don't think David Lynch has. I have to look and see.
Let me ask you a question, especially because I feel like this is, with COVID going on and the rising cases we're seeing in majority of the states, when do you all think that you individually, personally, will be comfortable going to a movie theater again? Because for me, I'm a little bit of a germaphobe. And one movie in particular that has caused this for me is what's the Dustin Hoffman, Cuba Gooding Jr.
Outbreak
movie? Outbreak. Because there's the scene where they go to the movie theater and the guy has Ebola and he sneezes and it's like always goes in my head. So I kind of have a thing too with movie theaters anyway, which I go a lot. But when they're super crowded, it stresses me out. So I don't usually like going on opening day. But for me personally, with this going on the way it is, like I can't see myself going to a theater probably this year at all.
Yeah, I'm good. Again, I value the theatrical experience. I love it.
Which I do. Yeah,
sometimes it's the only place I can watch a movie in peace,
Yeah.
Or unless I'm like late at night falling asleep. But no, I'm good to be out the rest of this year. We'll see. They're doing some trials this summer. We'll see how the vaccines go. But
and two, for the theater, like the thing that's kind of a chicken and egg problem is, say some of the theaters reopen and their plan is every other seat is open, so you're not sitting directly next to someone unless you book a ticket with someone you live with. Like if they have that kind of distancing stuff going on.
But that's hard.
I'm just saying, but I'm just trying to lay out the scenario. And then I'd seen, I think it was Cinemark had shared like, they're going to have people with high-powered disinfectant, like basically hoses where they're spraying stuff down. And there's been more and more research that says you're not super likely to get COVID-19 from contact surface, but it's in the air. So if they were to say a theater shows a movie and everybody's distanced and they spray it down with disinfectant in between, and then they skip that theater for the next screening. So they show one from like 1 to 3 p.m. and then 6 to whatever p.m. So it's enough time for the air to dissipate completely. But then the question is, are you filtering air into one auditorium from the other? If it's a system that circulates air throughout the entire building, there's so many things you can't control that I don't know how safe I feel doing that until there is because the other thing too is we do not know what all the long-term consequences are of being getting COVID and recovering. If you're an asymptomatic and you never have symptoms, do you possibly have complications? Because was it the Spanish flu from 1918 caused basically shaved years off the lives of people who got it. And then there's element two is they're talking about changing healthcare stuff. and trying to repeal the remaining parts of the Affordable Care Act. So my thing is, will COVID-19 be a pre-existing condition if they got rid of them?
Yeah.
Or if you tested positive, you now do not qualify for certain services?
I'm obviously not going to say the name of my boss, but this goes into late January. My boss had no symptoms, but he almost died. He was in the hospital for like 3 or 4 weeks, where he had so many blood clots in his lungs that he couldn't breathe. And, a lot of stuff now is they think that it was COVID. So what's the long-term ramifications of that? Because you've had so many blood clots in your lungs. And the thing is like, while you may be asymptomatic, which at the time he was, because he is somebody who has asthma, I don't want it. It seems bad.
Even if the percentage chance of you dying from it isn't super
low.
high,
Yeah.
we don't know what the long-term ramifications are for the health of your lungs, for all these different things.
Derek, imagine how disappointed you are when you go see a movie and you pay $25 and the movie's bad. Imagine that plus getting COVID. I can't take that risk. I can't. No movie is worth it.
Another thing to take into consideration is just think about how many times you've gone to movies where it's like the pre-assigned seating and people didn't pay attention or just they disregarded what the assigned seating was. Now imagine all the people who have these mental breakdowns in public places when they're asked to wear a mask or follow a certain procedure, and just imagine how they're going to react if they're told you can't sit here or something.
Yeah.
I just don't trust people, and that's the problem.
Well, too, I just don't feel like being put in a situation where I had to deal with something.
Well, and you have no control once you're there.
Yeah, you don't have any control over it. So for me personally, I think that I'm out on the movies for the rest of the year.
Well, and two, a big
only thing we did, we went to the drive-in.
I
would do the drive-in.
We saw Trolls 2. Not my choice as far as what I would go to, but
not that Troll.
Trolls 2. Is that your Trolls 2?
No. We saw the Dancing Trolls movie.
For
my daughter.
No, Justin Timberlake Trolls. Yeah.
But I just have a hard time believing that Disney or Warner Brothers or any of these studios is going to want to do their marquee movies. They're expecting to make $1 billion worldwide. I do not see them releasing them in theaters when there's this half full theaters concept and all this stuff. I just don't see them wanting to do that. If there's not those big movies, people don't want to go.
Yeah. And the interesting thing though, is the fallout this has for years to come.
Well, theater chains might go under.
Well, they're going to go under. There are going to be, but the thing is when you have these movies backlogged, you have let's just pick Black Widow, because that was supposed to come out already,
yeah.
And so you have something like that. I'm sure there's other tentpole movies that are supposed to come out.
Mulan, Wonder Woman.
Wonder Woman was 2021, so they were lucky. So you're gonna have all this stuff come out next year, and that's going to push back movies from 2021 to 2022, because you're not going to want to compete with Wonder Woman at the same time you have Mulan, and the same time you have.
That's assuming
Black
they can get
Widow.
these movies, if these movies can shoot, because
I
know they're doing
I don't think it'll be a huge backlog because nobody's making anything right now.
Yeah,
movie-wise, it's just
animated.
But you're still going to have stuff. I do think is going to push back though, because there are things that have already been filmed, and they come back. You're going to have a year or two where there's going to be so much stuff, and people haven't been to the movies for a long time. So is that going to be something where they're immediately going to shoot to? Because me and my wife have talked about this, and it's as things reopen, as much as we love film, going to I've been in my house so much, the last thing I want to do is go sit in the theater.
The only thing I would do is if I had a full bodysuit and I would go see Dune when that comes out this year at a screening where I saw nobody had bought a ticket to, the latest screening on a Tuesday. Or something, I would say, okay, nobody's bought a ticket. It starts in 3 minutes. I'm buying a ticket, walking in the door, and just scanning my thing and not going.
Here's the thing too that kills me though. But just real quick, what makes me aggravated too though is they're going to put all this cleaning procedures on essentially young adults, people that are in high school or early college. And I'm a union steward, so I think like this, and you're not going to give them more money. So that's what aggravates me too. You're going to have these people. You're going to give these young people
beyond their pay grade.
Yeah, and you're going to give people a job, and this goes for grocery stores and because those people deserve money because they've been through hell. But you're going to give these very young people really highly responsible stuff to do and not give them more money. Hey, go take care of this disease that can put you on a ventilator, but you only make $10 an hour.
Well, basically, I guess the difference would be you think about like a lot of the cleaning procedures would be required. Think about how much more typically the janitorial crew at a hospital would make compared to a retail worker.
Hey,
because those jobs are nothing. Those are highly, a lot of those jobs, they do require a high level of skill and training because you have to be very thorough.
You're dealing with biological material. And
I had a friend that would clean that stuff. Yeah.
And it's basically like asking, somebody that works at customer service for Apple to start coding apps. You're kind of pushing stuff down the food chain.
Well, and two, like how much does this spray cost? And, if they have 3 people per screening, or 2 people per screening coming in here, like they're blowing all their profits.
Yeah.
Like there's nothing, like why stay open?
But something else I think about too, though, with a lot of this disinfectant and cleaner is, okay, what's in it? What does that do?
Is it safe?
Is it safe for the individual spraying it?
Is it carcinogenic?
Again, is it carcinogenic? And that's something else that I think of because like in my job, I have union protection to come in and say, nah, we ain't doing that. But a lot of these kids are young or they're lower wage people who don't get the protections that somebody like me have. So when I see that, I always kind of worry about those individuals. Are they getting gloves? Are they getting respirators? Are they getting this? Are they getting that? So that's another thing too, where I get turned off because I remember Cinemark sent me an email and it's from like the CEO about, what they're going to do to clean it. So I responded like, are you going to pay your employees more? And obviously they didn't respond to it, but it's like, do not put more responsibility on these people who are going to have to deal with a bunch of bullshit.
Well, and
not pay them more money.
And if the masks are mandatory, because they had that big blowback where they said they're not mandatory, then everybody lost.
Well, AMC said it wasn't, and then there was the big blowback.
Rightfully so, there was a big blowback. But now these employees making, whatever the minimum wage is,
10, they might be making more, but.
Yeah, $9.50 here, right, or something. And they're going to be yelled at, like all these videos of, "Can you please put on your mask?" While
Well, because I think that the scenario you would encounter, which in a lot of these stores you've seen with these meltdown videos, is the stores have a policy that says, "Please wear a mask." So people wear it when they walk in, then take it off, put it in their pocket, and go about their business. And then the employees ask them, and then get yelled at.
I live in the south end of Louisville, and if you're familiar with the south end of Louisville, people consider to be a little trashy. But I go to Peddler's Malls and a bunch of stuff. So at first they were really enforcing the mask. And there's some women at a Peddler's Mall I go to that I don't want to be on their bad side. So I really enjoyed seeing them enforcing the mask on the first couple of days because you're not going to tell them no.
Yeah.
But those are people that they aren't taking shit and they're also in their 30s or 40s. Okay, but now you put this on a manager of a person that's maybe 20 who doesn't have the life experience to stand up to these assholes.
Or the money to make it worth it.
And the money to make it worth it. So I feel for them because it's like, it's literally not worth it for them because how many videos have you seen of people there's a video that was viral at Walmart where this greeter was trying to make this guy put a mask on. He had to essentially block him to the ground. And it's like, I'm sorry, whatever you're making hourly is not worth that. And that's where I see stuff like that. And as somebody who is lucky enough to make a good wage, it aggravates me that these people who don't make as much as me have to deal with this bullshit.
Well, and it's really annoying too, just think about the theaters that drive-ins have for the most part gone away and there's very few and far between. And this would be a time for them to have a huge resurgence. But it's kind of limited because they can only show one screening a day or a night because you can't do the screening till dark. They usually do a double bill.
Yeah, they do double features, but you can't do multiple. But also the one we have is closest to us, not the Georgetown one, is a family one. So they don't do anything rated R. And if I'm going to see Tenet or something, I'm not going to watch it. I don't want to watch that on a drive-in screen.
Well, and two, you're getting
I want to watch films I've seen before on there, or ones that I'm going to see for my daughter or whatever, because she's barely paying attention anyway.
Well, there's lesser audio and video quality and all that stuff. But let's see. So other news. Let's see. if it actually happens. So apparently there'll be a new Evil Dead movie called Evil Dead Rise because Bruce Campbell's been talking about it. It's going to be directed by Lee Cronin, who made The Hole in the Ground. And they said that it's not going to necessarily be linked to like a cabin in the woods, so it's going to be its own thing. And I don't think there's been any specific announcements, but I don't think it'll be tied to the 2013 Fede Alvarez remake or reboot.
It's a shame.
Or the Ash vs. Evil Dead show.
Did somebody say it was maybe going to be in a skyscraper?
Yeah,
I don't think there's been any story details except for speculation.
Somebody from Bloody Disgusting mentioned that, like, based on something.
Yeah.
Well, look,
Yeah.
I'm going to go on the record and say Evil Dead 2013 was one of the best movies of the decade. So the fact that they wouldn't continue that story with the lead actress in it is kind of a shame. Hopefully they will.
Well, I think with Fede Alvarez, he's just really busy.
But I mean, you could still carry it on with other people and have a quality movie and get some of the returning cast.
Yeah, but they're probably not going to be as passionate as if they got to bring their own spin to Evil Dead. You know what I mean? Like they're not going to. They're probably going to put in 110 if they're doing a sequel to that one. But if it's their own thing, they're going to put in that extra little, and that's I'm not saying I'm not excited for it. I'm not uninterested in it. We'll see.
I just would like to get a fuller picture of who's involved in it. But I just think for me, if there's no Bruce Campbell connection and there's no connection to the 2013 one, I lose a little bit of interest. Unless if
but the 2013 had no real connection.
You
don't know.
But it was so good and it outdid the original.
I think it's fine though if they say that's just a overall branch of a series or a property, and they can make new different stories with different characters and different scenarios going forward.
If they're going to do a Halloween season of the witch, I'm cool with it. But where it's like it's just the Evil Dead but something different, I'm fine with that. Because I do think change is good and innovation is good and giving somebody else to do their own spin is great. But then again, it's kind of like, because I wasn't that hot on Ash versus Evil Dead. If you go back and listen to the original podcast of when we covered season 1, which is the one I watched, like outside of the Sam Raimi directed first episode, it just kind of got to where like there's literally episodes where Bruce Campbell maybe didn't walk 2 feet. So like I wasn't super hot on it, and maybe I was overcritical, which is possible.
Well, season 2 really amped up a lot of that.
Yeah,
in terms of what was actually happening,
but I still watch it. Like I'm not gonna lie and say I'm not gonna go to the theater and pay money for it because I will, but it might not be the hottest thing I'm on.
Let's see. So other news. So there's been an adaptation of some Clive Barker's Books of Blood that's coming to Hulu this Halloween. So I guess it's already been shot because it says it's coming in October. And it's a feature film anthology. And it's being directed by Brannon Braga, who had worked on the Orville, which was that Seth MacFarlane Star Trek show. I think so. So kind of an interesting group there, but interesting to see what they do with it because some of the Hulu stuff, the originals have been hit or miss. Now the FX on Hulu has been great because it's just FX stuff, but so at least that's one new thing. And also, was it the second season of Haunting of Hill House, which is a different name because it's a different the Haunting of Bly Manor is going to be out this October. So that's at least one other horror thing that's for sure coming out in October that we know you'll be able to watch because with some stuff like the new Halloween movie, will they release that to VOD if there's not a theatrical release? Who knows? But
I kind of hope they do because I would like them to normalize the option of VOD and theatrical release at the same time.
I think they do realize that once that cat gets out the bag to a certain extent, theaters are going to be a much, much more niche experience. Because if a parent could sit there and say, instead of taking me, my wife, my 2 kids, and their friend to go see Avengers 15 and then spending $45 on snacks and $60 on tickets and driving out there, if instead I can spend $20 to watch the new movie at home where the snacks are free or much cheaper, like there's a certain level once the cat's out of the bag, it's not going back in terms of people.
No, there is. But that's not my problem. That's the theater's problem.
Well, and the other element is the theaters have a lot of power to make, like when there's advertisements in every theater for a movie, they can make it get seen by more people than if you're relying solely on people searching it out. And two, you have non-tech savvy people who will not use a TV and an app to watch stuff. They want to go to a place and give a $20 bill to someone and walk into a room. So
and that's fine because those people are
but that audience is shrinking so much where it's like, you know.
Yeah. I mean, so it's tough to see. I mean, like the theatrical experience is something I do relish. And I was talking to Julie earlier about, like, we were just reminiscing on the very mundane things we miss. And it's like, I do miss going to the theater like at least once a week or a couple times a month. But and
though, when you think about it, like with the theatrical experience, there's only been a couple of movies in a while that to me have felt like a real experience. Now, I'll say, like, obviously the Avengers, the last couple ones have been so big that they're huge experiences, and that's something I think you want to experience in a theater full of people because you get something out of that you don't get it watching it at home. I will also say, like, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is another movie that I think benefits from watching on the big screen. But then there's other stuff that I don't think benefits me either way wherever I watch it.
Well, there's a lot of stuff where I feel like, so Dr. Sleep I saw it was trending on Twitter.
Yes, that's
because it hit HBO Max. So I think that's something where if it was released as a 3-part, 4-part series, if they took that just movie, the extended director's cut it up into 4 parts and release it on HBO Max or whatever, or Netflix or streaming, it would have been a way bigger phenomenon than it was at the theater. But now that it's on streaming, I saw it was trending, and I was like, hopefully nothing came out about somebody involved with it being, a sexual predator or something.
Yeah.
And it seemed it was just that it hit HBO Max, so people were discovering it for the first time. So it's like, well, good. It deserved more attention.
Yeah, and that was probably one of the best. We can talk about movies of the decade. We had our podcast that covered it. But it'd be really hard pressed for me not to say that. And, damn it, The Lighthouse is good, too, because I watched that the other day.
It's on Amazon Prime.
Now, I will say, though, Lighthouse is a movie. Which of you all did? We all watch it in theaters, right?
Julie and I rented it.
I did. I watched it in theaters.
Okay. Now, to me, that is a movie with the way that it's shot and the audio in it and the visuals very much benefited from being in a theater because I love nautical stuff and the ocean sounds, and it was just such a weird movie that I really liked watching in theaters.
Mm-hmm. Well, especially because that theater screen isn't as crisp as your 4K TV at home. No. So it's, and I haven't seen it. I haven't watched it since on video at home.
I watched it on Prime the other day.
But yeah, the theater screen, like, for me, like, even benefited that it's okay. It's not it's like as crisp as a pristine.
Well, because a lot of theater screens are 2K, and then a lot of the big ones are 4K, I think, from what I remember people who worked in projection talking about.
And just the nature of it being projected, it's just not going to be as bright.
This is a different discussion real quick, but Courtney, my wife, she wasn't here when I watched it again because I watched it yesterday. But a lot of times I watch, like, I'm trying to think of movies that have penises in it. I bring this up for a point because Midsommar had a penis in it, and what's with the Nicolas Cage? Mandy. Both had male frontal nudity. And every time I watch a movie that has something like that, my wife always walks in at the point where it's just the male frontal nudity. And it's like, what the fuck? And then walks out of the room because, like, I try to get her to watch these movies, and it's sometimes, like, I get Mandy not being somebody's cup of tea because it is a very long movie and it's very like an acid trip, I guess, but I always enjoy, like, watching those movies. And then she walks in on, like, the weirdest part. And the only other movie I could think of would be Walk Hard, because if anybody's watched that, there's, like, a really awkward male frontal nudity. If you've all seen Walk Hard, right?
I've only seen like part of it on TV. I started rewatching again the other day because I never watched not from start to finish. I would see pieces on TV.
It's the perfect parody of the musical biopics that were in vogue like 15 years ago.
There's like a point where John C. Reilly's like sitting at the edge of a bed and there's like a penis next to his head for like it feels like 5 minutes, but it's not. But it's
You haven't seen The Righteous Gemstones, have you?
No.
On HBO? Yeah.
No.
It's very
Is that
funny.
is that the first episode, William? Or is it the second?
I don't remember.
There's some dong in that.
Because I watched that all in the course of like a few days. But let's see. So some other brief news we can touch on before we get into discussing the stuff we've been watching.
Let me get into some news real quick because Unsolved Mysteries comes back July 1st. And I'm a huge Unsolved Mysteries fan. Robert Stack is the GOAT. But we get new Unsolved Mysteries July 1st. They're splitting the season up on Netflix. You get 6 episodes, and then, they'll have a little hiatus and you get 6 more. So I'm really excited about that. I don't know if they're going to have a host or not. I don't know how big of Unsolved Mystery fans you all are, but, obviously for me, like, I love Unsolved Mysteries. Robert Stack was great as the host.
Yeah.
So,
as a kid, I watched it when it was on, like that, and America's Most Wanted.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where, like, I think I could live with him not having a host because I do think, like, they had the run in the late 2000s teens or late 2000s where they had, I cannot think of the man's name, but they had another host and it just wasn't the same.
Well, I think having just having titles and stuff is better than a bad host.
But question.
You don't want a bad host.
If you all could pick a host, because we don't know if there's going to be one or not. Maybe they're really tight-lipped and there's going to be one. Do you have a host in mind that you would pick?
Well, there's a difference between somebody you think would be amazing for it and who they could actually get.
Yeah. But, like, David Duchovny seems like an easy go-to.
Yeah, that'd be pretty easy.
I don't know if that's going to happen or not. It'd be really awesome if they have a host, but I think it's somebody like that.
Or Patrick Stewart would be very stately.
Patrick Stewart would be awesome.
I was thinking, I'm not for this bringing back actors from the dead, which they've been talking about, like making that James Dean movie. But in this case, if they could like Hatsune Miku Robert Stack's voice, I would be okay with that. Like, Hatsune Miku is basically an AI-driven voice thing where they can basically just make her talk and she sounds like a person. So if they could do that to his voice and wrote the right scripts and everything, I would be okay with that. But honestly, I know you just watched Knives Out. I would be okay with basically a lot of the. I mean, I could go with a lot of people on that. I mean, Jamie Lee Curtis, Christopher Plummer, Daniel Craig.
It would all be great.
The one I thought about first was Don Johnson would be great.
Yeah,
but Michael Shannon. Michael Shannon was the first one I thought of. I would like to see Michael Shannon narrate that.
There's also like Morgan Freeman would be amazing.
He's overused though. He has this thing. No, that's
Samuel L. Jackson.
What was the show? It was the X-Files like show that was on Fox in the late 2000s, early 2010. Fringe. Who's the African American actor that was kind of like the leader of that? I cannot think of his name.
Oh, Lance Reddick, was he on that? I'm trying to remember.
He's great.
Yeah, he would be great because he looks the part. He has that gravitas in his voice. Because like Stack was always the straight man, and he had this. And one thing I think Robert Stack deserves a lot of credit for is he also made fun of himself because he went on like Saturday Night Live and made fun of him. He had TV commercials making fun of his character, and he went on Beavis and Butthead Do America, and he was again kind of like that Robert Stack Unsolved Mystery. He was the FBI agent in it, and he kept talking about getting everybody anal cavity searches. So. I do think that's one thing that gives him a little bit of credit because he was okay with like making fun of his stoic characters he played, and that's where I look at something like David Duchovny. I think he could probably do that because he did that in what was the model movie with Ben Stiller that was
Zoolander.
Oh God, Zoolander. He did that in Zoolander. So like I look at that, I'm like, oh, he would be the go-to choice. But then there's so many but even Gillian Anderson would be great for it.
There's a lot of nostalgia plays.
Or you could even give me David Harbour from Stranger Things, or Winona Ryder from Stranger Things, and I would take that. Or, don't have anybody at all. But I think on that show, for it to work, you have to have a narrator. And unfortunately, the narrator for Forensic Files has passed. If anybody watched that, he'd be great for it. But I'm excited for it. I'm off of work currently, so July 1st, I watch probably all 6 episodes.
Because like, what was it
So,
last year?
Is that Netflix?
Yeah,
it's
Netflix.
Right?
Because last year around 4th of July, the new Stranger Things season 3. So there's usually some big thing. So I'm definitely gonna be watching that too. Because there's not a lot else to watch. But
it's interesting though, because like
there's a lot to watch. There's just not a lot to watch.
Well, like there's still like everybody has their list of shame or their backlog, but
see, like the one thing that Unsolved Mysteries has over a lot of other things is one, like people like us having the nostalgia from it from a childhood of like it's scaring the crap out of you. And you go back and you watch it, and it doesn't scare you anymore as an adult. You just find it more interesting.
I like the acting,
but yeah, because it's bad. But it has that cachet of it's Unsolved Mysteries, and it has 30 years of kind of just existing.
There's you ever get on their website too? You go on their website,
and they still run the website.
Yeah, and it has people on there, about each episode. Like, hey, I think I know a lead on this.
And two, like the thing that something I think that would be interesting to see at this new season, because the original run, you very much have blinders on it because you remember the best of segments. Because a lot of those episodes were clunkers and had very boring stories that would not keep your attention. So if they can have episodes that are all bankers, that have like stories that are very interesting.
Now, from what I understand this time is that each episode covers one case.
Oh, okay.
So it's not like it was. Have any of y'all watched the trailer?
Yeah. No, I just usually wait to watch stuff.
Because it didn't give you much of anything. It gave you enough that and it's more international.
It lets you know how the recreations are going to be shot. They look better, of course.
Yeah,
but,
they
put the music in there. Yeah,
yeah. But I will say this as a Unsolved Mysteries, because almost to a fault that drives my wife crazy. I can't watch it right now because they dropped it off of Amazon Prime. I think it's more of a rights issue, but they'll get it back. But
do you think it'll be in Netflix now because of the new series?
I don't know.
I'm sure
as long as it shows up somewhere, because the music. I will say this: there's a lot of bad acting in Unsolved Mysteries, which makes it almost more endearing over time. But the music they put in that was great, because there's stuff in that some of the music that they use is still kind of haunting today, and almost reminds me of the Resident Evil save room stuff. And that music was kind of haunting in a way, so I like that. It's very nice.
We mentioned earlier Troll 2. A lot of the music in it sounded like the filler music from Unsolved Mysteries.
Yeah, and I just hope that it is successful, and I can see it being as much as a cultural phenomenon now as it was, especially in the early 90s.
True crime stuff is big. There's a whole cottage industry that builds up around true crime. There's podcasts and
as much as I love true crime, I don't like true crime that exploits. And unfortunately, in our era, a lot of true crime exploits without solving or helping.
Well, if the intentions are to tell a side of the story that wasn't told, or to try to shed more light on something that hopefully jumpstart the discussion around it, that's one thing. But if it's just crass commercialism, using it to sell something, then it's a little bit different. But yeah, I mean, so the other brief bit of news before we get into discussing the stuff we've been watching. So if you follow horror Twitter or horror film Twitter, I'm sure you saw that there's been a lot of fallout and long-standing podcasts that kind of fell apart. And all of it, somewhat connected. So, Cinestate was a company that had released, was it Bone Tomahawk and Bone Tomahawk, the Kurt Russell
Bone Tomahawk
movie. Then,
Western film.
And then there was Dragged Across Concrete and
Block 99. There's a bunch.
And then there was new Satanic Panic, I think, and there was a new one that was coming out.
So one of Sparrow Creek, a lot of them are really well reviewed too. And,
so basically the whole big thing around that was one of the producers who had worked on some of those projects. That was what was it? Adam Donaghy there's allegations against him of sexual misconduct or abuse or harassment, and it was claimed that the CEO of Cinestate and the other, the leadership was aware of it and overlooked it. And the movie VFW, there were allegations against some of the one of the actors in that there was an unsafe working environment where they were harassing people and sexually harassing and things like that, and there wasn't anything done about it. So there's a lot of troubling allegations. And there was that one article, forget which news outlet it was The Guardian or whoever it was, that was calling the Adam Donaghy like the indie horror world's Harvey Weinstein.
Yeah. So Daily Beast said how a right-wing movie studio enabled the Harvey Weinstein of indie film, but then also Dallas Observer. Also, their headline is Cinestate sees serious fallout following the expose on the Harvey Weinstein of Dallas. So I think that was a name. That was a name given to him, basically. This wasn't something they just made up for their headline.
But I think too, that is a bit of a mischaracterization, because they're not the movie studios making those direct-to-video movies that star Kevin Sorbo and Antonio Sabato Jr. and James Woods and like that crew. They were. I haven't seen all their films, obviously, because there's some of them I just hadn't gone around to, but like Bone Tomahawk, a lot of those movies, if you sit back and think of the worldview that maybe went into it, you're like, well, was this detrimental to Native people? Would they see that as negative? So there's things you can think about after the fact, but they did make content that skewed more to the right than to the left. But then they also owned Fangoria, where Phil Noble Jr., who were in that, they tended to lean a lot more to the left than to the right. And a lot of that's just being inclusive of, LGBTQ content. And because, they had like the one drag queen brothers that were in there. Didn't they do an art or had interviews with them or something? And there's other stuff people got upset about. Like, I don't want to see this in a horror magazine. So there's just all this stuff. So when all this came out, that just caused a lot of the online community to be very toxic. And then like Joe Bob Briggs, who had written for Rebeller, which was their more kind of right-leaning film website, he had said that he could no longer work for them. And he had his own...
Barbara Crampton, a couple other writers I like too, said, nope, we're done with Fangoria.
And Joe Bob even had his own controversy from a few, like somewhat before that, where he had made comments on Twitter that were him just seemingly making an attempt at a joke of like, I don't understand this LGBTQ stuff. That kind of...
Well, it wasn't on Twitter. It was an article he had wrote for, I think, a right-leaning website. And it was just like again, I like Joe Bob's stuff. Watch him. I honestly have not watched it since then, even though some people seemed okay with the response, some people's opinions that I trust. Some people have never been on him. But me, with everything else going on, I've just not been in the mood to, you know what I mean? Just even have to wrap my mind around any of that, or even I haven't been watching horror films really. But anyway, he wrote it for that site, and I guess he had some sort of apology that some people were okay with, some people weren't. But
I think
regardless, Cinestate is kind of falling apart, and Fangoria, so many people dropped off. I think Phil Noble or whatever, he basically announced that they've allowed them to sell Fangoria.
Well, and two, it's unfortunate
looking for buyers,
because the last issue that came out, so a friend of the podcast, Nathan Thomas Milner, he had done the cover art for that one, where they had interviewed Patton Oswalt or whatever. So, he got to do that, which is very cool.
Patton Oswalt wrote a couple articles for it.
But so all that's, it's unfortunate all that's falling apart. And whenever there's people that are abusing their position, because I think a lot of times what happens in indie film is people treat it not like a real workplace because they're making a movie, and people think that a lot of the rules that would apply to working in an office job or a corporate job or a retail job don't apply. And that's not the way it should work. You should never make anyone feel uncomfortable or make untoward advances towards people.
If anybody's into the indie wrestling world or the wrestling world,
there's been a lot of blow up stuff there too.
There's been a lot of blow up within the past week or so, just about a bunch of women going out speaking about the abuse of men in the industry. And I think the interesting thing into this is I'm trying to think how I can say this. The interesting thing about this is who believes women and who doesn't. Because yes, there are going to be some women that and men and whoever come out for their own game. But I think overall, for a lot of these people to come out and speak about like these awful things that happen to them, that's hard to do.
Well, there's
And-
nothing
and-
to
and
gain
every-
in a lot of cases.
And every
Yeah.
time, it's just constant harassment after
Yes.
they
Yeah.
actually came forward and stuff. And you say wrestling, also in the comedy world, there's been a lot, and then the gaming world too. There's been certain gaming journalists
Little bit.
and even
Angry
game
what,
developers. It has been
the
a wave,
gaming-
which I'm happy for.
But I tell you what, the gaming world is so ugly because I've not played online gaming in a significant amount of time, but since I've been off of work for this amount of time, and I've played a lot of online gaming. Now, I don't use a headset much anymore, but I'll play like Dragon Ball, Xenoverse 2, Mortal Kombat, a couple different things. But it's the amount of shit talking that goes on in these games. Like,
that's just terrible
it's
people.
almost,
but I'm talking
yeah.
about specifically. This is leadership at IGN. People going to harassment. There was another person who I think he was at IGN. Basically, he forced himself on somebody at I think it was a PAX or whatever, and then told him it'd be cool if they had to go meet their friends. It was just a terrible story. You got the writer for that new Star Wars game. What was the Star Wars game that just came out? Jedi Order.
Yeah,
I believe he was a writer on that. He's had some abusive allegations and stuff. Max Temkin and some others at maybe it's just Max Temkin, but there's been some, I guess, things handled poorly at Cards Against Humanity. It's just, thankfully, there's a huge wave. There's a lot of things coming to a head right now, and I'm happy for it. For everybody
happy
involved.
that people they feel more comfortable speaking up about
That's
it.
what I'm saying. You gotta get these people that are in power, that abuse their power in any way at all, out of there, and let them know there's going to be severe repercussions.
Well, and I guess it's just too. I've always
oftentimes there's no repercussions.
I guess part of it too is I've come from the world of having worked in the corporate world where things are taken very seriously, and you would get in major trouble for a lot of stuff. It's a lot of times people play things off as, oh, I was just asking someone out. It's you can appropriately ask someone out depending on the context. It should never be a leader subordinate situation, because then that just implies a lot. I mean, it can happen, but there's just ways to handle it and there's ways to not. The way to handle it is outside of work. Say, hey, would you have any interest in getting a drink sometime and talking? And if the answer is no, that's fine. That's the end of the conversation. But it could not be in a situation where you're someone responsible for their employment and their performance reviews, and you can't have that. But if you're a coworker, if you handle it respectfully and then drop it, I don't think most people have a problem. It's when people do weird stuff. And I've seen people do weird stuff, and I know women who talk about the weird stuff that men will do. They'll send them 50 messages in a row that say, hey, and then if they post a picture with somebody they're dating, they're like, oh, slut. It's okay.
Yeah, women I think in general go through hell on a lot of stuff. I'm not trying to change the topic. My phone's at 3%, so I'm gonna get into what I've been watching real quick.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So if I cut off, I'm sorry, my phone's dead. But yesterday I got to watch a couple of different movies, and I watched Creed 2. If you all watched any of the Creed films,
I know it's supposed to be awesome, but I'm honestly never really watched much of the Rockies. So I'm like, do I need to catch up on all the Rockies?
I will say this. No, you don't. You can, because you get enough from, well, I like what they do with Creed is, because I've watched the Rocky films, all of them. But they just kind of give you the summarization of what you need, but they bring it to a new audience. And Michael B. Jordan's great. Yeah. And you bring him in there as he's kind of like an illegitimate son of Apollo Creed. And just him dealing with that and his legacy of being a boxer. And I think it's, and the way they use it, what Sylvester Stallone can be just a schlocky, terrible actor, because I watched the most recent Rambo film lately, which was not great. Rambo that came out, 2008 or 9? It was pretty good. And then this one was just, but when he's Rocky, he only does enough that he's very great in it. and it's one of those movies when you see like the Black Lives Matter movement, and we talk about black filmmaking or movies that have black lead actors in it, because a lot of times, unfortunately, African Americans only get slavery movies or civil rights movies, and that's just seems what Hollywood wants to make over and over and over again, and they don't really get their own independent stories.
Yeah, unless they are like seemingly targeted for the black audience.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like then they'll say, "Oh, we'll make some money this way" or whatever.
Well, you have like the Tyler Perry movies, which you don't have them given a $50 million for original scripts.
Then you get Black Panther, and you realize, well, that was such a big deal. Because, it really wasn't about, while there was some struggle about black individuals or African Americans, it was really the first huge movie like that. Maybe Blade was somewhat like that.
Well, the $200 million budget type movies.
Yeah, but you don't get that. Where this was still lower budget, but you get a movie where you have an African American lead actor that is more geared toward African Americans. While you have Sylvester Stallone in it, he doesn't play a major role in it. He's not the driving force of the story. He's more of just a mentor in helping the story progress. And this is one of those movies that now Stephen Caple Jr. is who directed Creed 2. I don't know who directed the first one.
It was same director that did Black Panther.
And
Ryan Coogler.
Okay. Those are movies I'd recommend to watch because, man, they're just so good. And Michael B. Jordan, I think, is another reason why, because he's an exceptional actor. And anytime he's on screen, he's charismatic, he's fun to watch, he's engaging. But they're both on Amazon Prime. And they're overall, it's funny because this one's less about the boxing and it's more about the development of somebody living in their father's shadow. And I think that's kind of an interesting thing because you have a African American that has a highly successful father in a rich environment. We don't always get that, So I think it's a good movie to watch, especially too because like Netflix had that thing where they were like putting out to watch The Help and all these other movies. They're like, what? Why would you do that? Whereas this movie, because they caught a bunch of flack for that, if you're not aware, and this is a movie I'd really recommend because they're just good, and it kind of surprised me that it didn't make as much money as it probably should have because I think the box office was like $214 million.
I mean, it still did well, but it did
well. It had a $50 million budget, but they're just really good movies. I don't know if it's maybe Rocky fatigue because they did Rocky 6. Did y'all watch Rocky 6?
Yes. Or it was Rocky Balboa, wasn't it?
It was Rocky Balboa. Yeah, it was essentially Rocky 6. It was not great. He was like retired and came out and fought and whatever.
Yeah.
The other movie I want to get into real quick before my phone dies is Becky. And
Are we losing them?
Becky is the Kevin James movie, right?
Yeah.
We haven't seen it, but we can go and give a review real quick. All right, I'll pull up some stuff about it just in case he.
Well, yeah, because that was one that is the Kevin James, and I remember that being like the real selling point was just watch Kevin James play a white supremacist or a neo-Nazi. It's a teenager's weekend at a lake house with their father takes a turn for the worse when a group of convicts wreaks havoc on their lives. And it was kind of billed like a Home Alone against Nazis or something.
We'll see if he comes back. He may or may not.
I just know a lot of people had said they were somewhat interested. Yeah, because now he's dropped off completely. Some people are interested in watching it before all the stuff started going on with the police reform and the social injustice, and they're like, I don't know, it's the time to watch this right now with him. Kevin James is looking to break out of his shtick by playing a character that's opposite of his general roles. Instead of playing the aloof mall cop, he's now playing a bad guy. a few
Go ahead.
movies or actors tend to try to do that. And there was a few other movies that came around the same time that a lot of people were like, yeah, it's kind of a sour taste in my mouth to watch stuff about this type of people right now.
Well, he's also doing those YouTube shorts.
Yeah, those are
like
actually pretty
having a
funny.
little
The
fun,
Kevin
yeah.
James,
Yeah,
where he's like the audio guy.
Yeah, I haven't jumped in for myself. I haven't really jumped into a bunch of horror, and some horror, as everybody knows, this can just be fun or whatever. But one, just having my daughter a lot limits the stuff I can watch or the time the things I can watch and how much time I have. I did watch The Five Bloods, the Spike Lee film, yeah, on Netflix. And again, speaking of that, yeah, it's like it doesn't have De Niro, Pacino, and all that. Like, I get that they're not going to get as much money because the actors are not as big, but they did one thing of note to this was they're talking about Netflix was not going to pay for de-aging in this movie. Basically they said they try to get him to do the de-aging, and then they were fighting him on shooting in the flashback scenes in 16 millimeter. So, just talking about differences as far as Derek was talking about, getting the money to make some bigger films and stuff like that. Like this, and I thought it was a great film. Let's see here. Here's the synopsis. 4 African-American vets battle the forces of man and nature when they return to Vietnam, seeking the remains of their fallen squad leader and the gold fortune he helped them to hide. So this has, let's see here, Delroy Lindo, Jonathan Majors, Clark Peterson, Norm Lewis, Isaiah Whitlock Jr., and oh my gosh, why can't I think of his name? Black Panther himself, Chadwick Boseman. Right? Isn't he in this? I'm not seeing him on the cast list. Is that a secret or something?
I don't know, Sean. Is it?
I better not have confused. I know that's Chadwick Boseman. Yeah, Storm and Norman. So yeah, they basically go back to Vietnam. They get clearance to go under the pretense of recovering their fallen a fallen squad leader who is oh my gosh, why can't I think of his name again? What is his name? What's his name, Wave? Yeah, Chadwick Boseman. Sorry, I'm looking at all these names. I'm getting so Chadwick Boseman. He had died in Vietnam. They go back there, but in secret, they, again, minor spoilers for the storyline. They buried some treasure, some gold that they were supposed to be transporting basically after they get shot down because they're saying, hey, this is our reparations and we need to use this to liberate our Black brothers and sisters. But it comes down again. You have these characters. I think there's 5 Bloods. One has passed away. Delroy Lindo, his son shows up on it. So there's 5. There's 5 again. But essentially, there's debate about this, and Delroy Lindo, he is. I'm trying to think what all he's been in. I mean, you see him, you know who he is. I know you know who he is. He's Get Shorty, Malcolm X. I'm trying to think. He is a great actor. Anyway, he is wearing a MAGA hat. He's a Donald Trump supporter. So that shows you they're not afraid to. They have fractured ideologies. Most of them are the same, are just variations of what they believe in. But it is this conversation of like, what are we gonna do with this money? Is this gonna be ours? They've worked hard. They were soldiers. All this stuff, but it also deals with maybe not up front, but the projection of Vietnam and how that war was played out. And I've heard people, comment, Vietnamese film critics also talk about how this film portrays the Vietnam War and Vietnam differently. It is not like this mysterious place that kind of, there's a lot of layers to how it is presented. And it is not just the stereotypical Vietnam movie.
Playing CCR and
yeah, and sometimes they use specific music for specific reasons and connotations. This is a Black experience in Vietnam, and the way Black soldiers. I believe I saw it in this movie, or maybe I saw it somewhere else. How they were a smaller percentage of U.S. citizens, but they made up a bigger bulk of the soldiers that were sent to Vietnam. And you had all the and much. You saw Black Klansman, right?
Yes.
So minor spoilers for that, but I think it's just at the end of that movie where they kind of layer in some modern day footage, right? Or they maybe layer in some other historical stuff.
They have because that one's based on a true story, and at the end of it they kind of jump forward and say, here's how things still are today, even though this movie was set in this prior past period.
So again, this I very much like the way Spike does not shy about making this film is very educational at the same time, as well as being this film of them going back to get gold and recover their fallen squad leader. It is not afraid to be upfront about its education, where so much so where the characters are talking about a specific person or situation in a movement, and they'll flash a picture of this person, so you're getting educated through a lot of this as well, which is phenomenal. I love that. Like, that's why I watch some films, even a lot of foreign films. I'm like, even if I'm getting a story, I'm getting educated on, so many more things the film isn't saying explicitly. But yeah, there's so much to that. And as being from Louisville, Muhammad Ali, he threw his medals into the Ohio River, I believe the story is, because, he was not going to Vietnam, and he didn't care about the medals if he wasn't going, because basically.
Well, no, I think that was he got back from the Olympics. It's like the story goes. I don't know I think he even later said it wasn't like verbatim. It was like the truth of the experience, maybe not the exact thing that happened, where he got back from winning Olympic gold medals and then couldn't even get served at a restaurant in his hometown. Right. So then he was so disgusted with it, he just threw the medals. So that was kind of the story on that.
Which that is the reason why he was not fighting in Vietnam as well. He's not treated as an equal. So why go there, put his life on the line for a country that does not respect him?
Well, and just possibly disagreeing with it's like the whole war as a whole.
Yes, yeah.
Because I think it's hindsight. You look at it, you say, well, that war didn't need to happen, but
yes. Yeah, and that's what why go over there and kill other people that are downtrodden? There was many reasons he was against it, and many people should have been, but that was also a big issue of like, really, like you're putting us out there on top of all that, and so they talk. I think they talk about Black Panthers and Ali and everything with that. Again, briefly, but they'll show footage from that and stuff. And I love it. I love that part of it, and the rest of the story is also good, and it moves. I think the movie's like a little over 2 hours. It's not short, but I enjoyed the entire experience. So it's on Netflix. Definitely recommend watching it. Spike Lee, and the Black Klansman. That's on Amazon Prime, right, or HBO maybe?
I think it's HBO. That's where I watched. I'm not sure if it's what it's on now.
Yeah.
Let's see. So so the Five Blood, so that's, kind of a new release that's on the current streaming services. So like another new release, something I watch, like an actual movie that's on one of the major streaming services. So The Vast of Night, it's on Amazon Prime. In the US, I would assume globally. I'm not sure, because it's an original, not just a movie they're releasing. And that is one I'd heard about from the film festival circuit, and I heard some different critics talking about it. That has kept me to watch it, so we finally watched it. So it was directed by Andrew Patterson, and written by Andrew Pattinson and Craig Sanger. I don't know how you pronounce that. But the IMDb synopsis says, in the twilight of the 1950s, on one fateful night in New Mexico, young switchboard operator Faye and charismatic radio DJ Everett discover a strange audio frequency that could change their small town and the future forever. So it's set kind of in this 1950s-ish time period in New Mexico. So, kind of in the desert. And it's basically just, follows during the course of a high school basketball game, which is kind of like the big draw where everybody goes to in that town, like this really small town. Teenager who works at the switchboards and a teenager who works at the radio station encountering a strange signal and trying to figure out what's going on amongst like reports of things being seen in the sky. So very much in, that kind of 1950s, hearkening to like Roswell. And I think they said it was more inspired by like other encounters with UFOs in different parts of the US over the decades. It's an interesting movie because I think the budget was like 700,000. So not a huge budget movie. Not, you're not going to get Independence Day with this. It's not stuff flying and blowing up. It's more of kind of a reserved kind of peek at a couple of characters going through something, and kind of has like a Twilight Zone feel to it. Because part of the framing device is that it's like a TV show or something. So it's kind of like Twilight Zone-esque. And it sets it in the 1950s time period. They do a very good job at getting you drawn in and making it feel like it's that time period. So they have, era appropriate cars and conversations, and I don't know the authenticity of it, but they're talking about science magazines predicting stuff for the future. And some of that's funny to juxtapose like the stuff they talk about that, people may be still talking about being in the future, and then them prognosticating which will actually come to pass, and it being, so it's interesting to see some of that kind of like retro futurism stuff. But, it's a kind of a character, it's just basically a two-hander. I mean, there's other characters that filter throughout, but you kind of follow Faye and Everett, the two main characters. They kind of go through the night and try to figure out what's happening. And, it's a movie where it's not about the visual spectacle. There are some special effects in it at points that I thought looked really well done. But it's more about the characters and their interactions. And two is like the filmmaker, you're sitting there watching it and you're like, man, they did a lot of long takes. There were takes that lasted for minutes and minutes. But you never thought that it did. You never really felt the weight of it. It wasn't a showy, 1917 camera moving everywhere. It's more of just, a lockdown shot that moves a little bit throughout the course of a back and forth. And it makes sense. And just shows, they either had good rehearsals or all the actors were, used to doing stage productions where they're used to memorizing, 10 minutes of or the entire show of dialogue. There's a lot of cool shots that I was like, so I wonder if this was all really done in one shot or if they stitched stuff together, because some stuff looked like it went from dollies to Steadicam to maybe a drone or something. So I was like, I wonder how they did that. I would assume they digitally stitched some of them together, but it wasn't stuff that really drew your attention to it or was kind of supposed to be showy like a lot of wonders can be. Because I still haven't watched that movie yet, Extraction, the Chris Hemsworth one. I just remember there's some one-shot thing. Like, I don't think anybody's going to be talking about the individual stuff in that. I just recognized it as somebody who works on or, has interest in how films are made and all that. But the performances are great. I kind of, I'm into that type of sci-fi, that kind of grounded stuff that feels like it could be a retelling of an actual experience. So I really dug it.
What's the name of it one more time?
The Vast of Night. It's on Amazon Prime. And it's one of those movies where I could see because I think it has really good review scores on like Rotten Tomatoes. It had really high scores. The user score on IMDb is 6.7, and the user score on Amazon Prime was like 3 point something. So not like a 4 or 5, or a 5 would be very difficult, but it wasn't like the high 4s. But I think part of it is people see supernatural occurrences and they want to see stranger things. They want to see a creature killing people and eating it. They don't really want to see the more mundane nature of trying to figure out what's causing a signal disruption to your radio frequencies and phone calls or something. So like on Stranger Things, like the first season when the character Joyce, Winona Ryder's character, is trying to figure out through the flashing lights and where her son is. It's more if it's that and less of the Demogorgon and the pop culture references and stuff. But I really enjoyed it. I thought the dialogue was really well done. The acting was great. it's just go into it not expecting a big bombastic explosive sci-fi film and just more of a kind of, feature length Twilight Zone episode that's just about like the experiences of a small town. So I really enjoyed that. Recommend that for anybody that's into, based on described it. I think Derek will probably be into it based on watching all the unsolved mysteries and stuff. So that was.
He looks like I don't know if there's other editors on there, but the director is Andrew Patterson.
Yes,
and he wrote it and also edited it and produced it.
Yeah, I think he funded it out of his own money too.
But he changed his name for the editor and the writer.
Which I James Montague.
Yeah, I heard some people say some other people have done that to seem like they have a bigger production to be taken more seriously.
Yeah, which is like dumb that you have to do that, but it is true that they want to see stuff that has more people involved. But yes, I really recommend that. It's on Amazon Prime. I really look forward to whatever they do next. And I hope that he doesn't get snatched up and brought into like the Marvel system, but is more of like, let's just make more of this type of thing with more free reign. You can even keep the budgets the same, but they pulled off a pretty convincing 1950s small town. And I think they even they show a basketball game or parts of it. They had to even go into the basketball court and remove the 3-point line, which wasn't in existence at that point. And then that, cost money for them to redo this floor at some gym. So there's kind of small details like that. So I really enjoyed it, and Julia really liked it too. And it's, you can kind of dip your toes into the sci-fi. I don't really say it's horror, but it's more just sci-fi realm without it being just kind of some depressing ass, dour post-apocalyptic stuff. Yeah, it's on Amazon Prime. So, Amazon Prime, Vast Night, Netflix, The Five Bloods. There's a lot of other new stuff coming out too. Derek, mentioned Unsolved Mysteries gonna have a new season 2. So that's, some newer stuff you can check out that is new and just came out. It's not just, past releases. And I did watch the George Romero remake from 2010, The Crazies. And you said you saw it in theaters, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's the one that had Timothy Oliphant in it, and Radha Mitchell, who was also in Pitch Black and Silent Hill. And it was directed by Breck Eisner. So I enjoyed it. I remember when it came out, and I didn't, for whatever reason, at that point in time, get a chance to see it in theaters. And I'd seen the George Romero original at some point in the past. So I enjoyed it. I thought it was a well done, kind of straightforward version of not a zombie film, but more in the lines of an amped up 28 Days Later, Infected. Because it's basically just people get infected and they go crazy. Hence the name, The Crazies. So they're not zombies. They still have the faculties to use guns or open doors or drive cars. It's just they become crazy and want to kill people. And then, it's kind of like a government experiment or something gone wrong. So harkens back to all those, Return of the Living Dead, all the stuff where a government screw up causes it. And, I enjoyed it. I thought Timothy Oliphant, he played the sheriff, which he was kind of born to play a Southern-ish, and that one it was Midwestern because they were in Iowa.
That was probably the first thing I ever saw him in that I remember. But yeah,
because he was also in
great.
He was in Deadwood. He was in Scream 2, so you saw that.
Okay, yeah.
But then this is so post Deadwood, he was also in Justified and this and a bunch of stuff is kind of a cop or sheriff character. And so I enjoyed it. I wouldn't say it's on the same plateau of because it's not really a zombie movie, but a lot of times you can lump zombie/infected movies together because they're the same general genre and they follow the same tropes, because this is very similar tropes to a zombie film.
All I remember is the baseball field, and then spoilers for the end of it, which was in some place that's a mechanic shop or something with cars.
Truck stop.
Truck stop with the lifts for the truck and stuff. That's all I remember.
Yeah, a really big gas station / service shop.
Yeah, and we walked out saying that was pretty good, and that was it. And I never watched it again.
Yeah, it was weird watching that in the current pandemic conditions, and then saying like, oh, if you were to say in today's world, if somebody came out and said the water supply is poisoned, if you drink it, you'll get a disease, people would be like, screw you, and they would purposefully drink a gallon of it in front of you.
Yeah. Or
so
bleach.
Like, and but like, I think that today's world is shown whenever you watch zombie movies or stuff like that, and you're like, man, these characters are making really dumb decisions. At this point, I think the real world has given writers a lot more leeway to have characters do stuff that you're like, if they're like, okay, there's infected people, if they bite you, you get it, and you'll go crazy. So just lock yourself in and don't go outside. Like, you can't tell me what to do. And then they would go out. But
another thing too that I've recently, there has been a lot of good stories about people helping each other, even and not just talking about COVID too. It's just the communities coming together during all these protests as well. But we always have those post-apocalyptic movies where it is everybody's just basically trying to kill each other. And people have talked about, oh, it's like Lord of the Flies. And there was that article about the real Lord of the Flies, where those boys were shipwrecked. I think they were from Australia. Did you see anything about that?
No.
The story of Lord of the Flies is all the boys are on the island and they start, going crazy and
school.
But this was a group of boys that went boating one day, and they crashed, and they were there I think they were there a year and a half. Well, essentially, they all divvied up chores. They had guidelines. They had rules. They would get fights, and people would get, punished and all this. They had built their small society and all cooperated and survived because they did that. And, humans are a cooperative species. And thankfully, it makes me hopeful. Like, okay, I'm kind of, aside from like the new Mad Max, and Mad Max is cool. It gets a pass. And there'll be others that I'll like. But I am much more, I'm like, now I'm past watching those post-apocalyptic films that are made after this that are all just, it's just like the most depressing and everybody's just trying to kill everybody.
Well,
like, I want to see the post-apocalyptic film that has things have crumbled, but people are trying to make it together. And you could have threats, and there'll be idiots in the camps for sure. But on the whole, like, there will be good people that sprout out.
Well, and two, a lot of the zombie films, and like, they'll have the endings where your main characters survive, and then wait a minute, it's actually even worse. And that movie was no exception for following that trend of like the 2000s, because the zombie genre kind of got rejuvenated in a little few year window, or the great Infected / Zombie with 28 Days Later, Shaun of the Dead, the Dawn of the Dead remake, and then all the sequels and stuff that followed, and The Walking Dead. This just felt like it was kind of in that mid period, like where zombie stuff was starting, zombie / infected movies are starting to kind of wind down a little bit because 2010 would have been the year The Walking Dead came out. So it still stayed popular for years after that. And there was the video games like the Left 4 Deads and the zombie modes of all the different shooter games and stuff. But it's a movie like, that was an enjoyable movie. It was pretty well done. Nothing where I think you absolutely have to go back and watch it. It was just on Tubi, I think, was where it was at to watch for free. So I was like, well, I've never watched this. It wasn't, and two, I was doing other stuff. So like, well, it's something I haven't watched because I don't want to just keep watching the same things. But yeah, so that was The Crazies. It's on Tubi. I think it was, probably a much easier watch than the original George Romero one, because I remember that one being kind of low budget and kind of dry.
Did you see that one of his industrial films may be released? I guess it's shown at MoMA and stuff like that. Basically, it was, those are basically films commissioned by organizations, companies, or whatever. I guess it was maybe by a church or a Christian organization, but apparently it is pretty polished and good, I guess, for one of those.
Well, yeah, because it's about an older person going to an amusement park, and
it's called amusement park, right?
Yeah, or the amusement park, and
Yeah.
it's basically an elderly gentleman sets out for what he thinks to be a normal day in an amusement park, and is suit embroiled in a walking nightmare, the likes of which you've never seen. And people have done a lot of hyping it up, something like one of his best movies and stuff. And I think a lot of the hyperbole like that hurts stuff when you finally watch it because you have all these expectations. But just something from like somebody that's such a well-known commodity and has so much work that spanned the decades, to have something that seems to be rather seminal or like one of the better works not be widely seen as odd. And
Well, I mean, considering
in
it
modern
was,
filmmakers and music,
considering it was commissioned though,
Yeah.
those people have, and I think there was a critic from the time. Again, things are much more shocking in the 70s than, it's harder to shock now than it was back then. But I think whenever this was made, but I think somebody had saw it at the time, and they said basically they're like, this film should never be released to American audiences. They should not see this because they're not ready for it, and nobody should, this should not be available for wide consumption, basically. So hopefully it has a bold stance. I mean, he is, did not shy away from being political or having political or specific perspective in his films and stories. So considering he probably had carte blanche, it sounds like, because I think from what I heard, the ending of this was not, he maybe went wilder with the ending of this than those who commissioned expected. I think maybe he took some liberties himself or something like that. So, I'm curious to see it. Yeah, I'm curious to see it as a piece of historical stuff. Yeah, I don't know about, who's to say until we watch it.
Yeah. So that was the movies. Trying to think, like, so Julie and I, we watched Lucy in the Sky, the Natalie Portman movie that was from Noah Hawley, the showrunner of Legion and Fargo and FX. Not really horror. It was interesting. I think it kind of got panned by critics. Like, we enjoyed it. It was just a little bit slow for what the story was.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of a fictionalized account of a real story, because I'm guessing they didn't get the rights to it. It was about, if you remember, there was a female astronaut a couple years ago, where her and another astronaut were having an affair, and then he was sleeping with another astronaut. So she drove like cross country, and like the story was that she's wearing in a diaper and had like guns with her. So it's like a fictionalized version of that with different names and locations and story. But just getting the same feeling and the same basic story. And, it was, good acting. It had, it also had John Hamm and Dan Stevens and Zazie Beetz and, other good actors in it. But it was like a little bit slow, and it had a lot of switching perspectives on things. Like, they changed the aspect ratio from like 4:3 or whatever it was that had like the square aspect to the 2:35:1, and switching back and forth, and a lot of stuff that was kind of artsy fartsy, which if you're doing that over the course of an episode of Legion, that's a 50-minute TV show, like when you take out the commercials, a 50-minute network show, if you take it out, doing that 2 or 3 times across the episode is fine. But if it keeps doing it back and forth in a movie, if somebody's not into film stuff and recognizes what they're doing, they're like, is there something wrong with my TV? Why is it showing it on this? Why are the bars on the side now? So I think some of it was a little bit overdone. It was kind of getting like she felt claustrophobic on Earth after having been in space. But there's ways you can do that without having to resort to consistently doing a lot of the aspect ratio trickery. I don't think it was as bad as the reviews gave it, giving it like a 30% on Rotten Tomatoes or something. I think it was just an ambitious movie that missed the mark a little bit. That was still, well done. Just maybe had a little bit too much indulgence, and maybe could have been trimmed down a little bit and lost a little bit, a little bit straightforward narrative. Because once it actually gets that stuff, it is very intriguing. And it's got John Hamm playing kind of a variation of a Don Draper character and stuff. So I enjoyed it. It wasn't like, I think, like Oscar contender, but how they initially kind of build it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I enjoy it. I just think they maybe could have dialed it down a little bit in terms of length and stuff.
I keep meaning to watch Vox Lux. I love Natalie Portman, so I'll watch that probably one day, but I keep meaning to watch Vox Lux. I've almost started it several times, but yeah, she's awesome. really enjoy watching her.
Trying to think other stuff I watched, like TV stuff. I watched Ozark season 3, and I was like, am I in the mood for this? Because it's such a dour show. Because it's Jason Bateman and Laura Linney, and their family is drug cartel money laundering, and characters are dying, and it's all of, like, the blue and green visuals and color balance, and I was like, do I really want to watch all this stuff with people dying, and they're always just getting dug in deeper and deeper. It was a good season. I think it's still kind of like a tier beneath like Breaking Bad or Better Call Saul or other stuff. Because at least with Better Call Saul, it has fun. Like, even though people are getting killed and they're in deep and stuff's going to go bad, it still has stuff that is just fun. And it seems like Ozark lacks any of that. Like, there's not as much visual flair or fun in it. It's all just kind of dour and them just getting dug in deeper and deeper. I'm still going to keep watching it, but when you set it like at a lot of beaches and stuff, or the lakes, you'd be like, could there be a little bit more color in it? Because it's all like that bluish hue.
Yeah.
And some people complained about it. It's like, I get what they're going for emotionally, why they do that. People complain that it's too dark, and I've never really experienced that because I've properly calibrated my TV. But you can't expect everybody's going to do that. Because like, I know Game of Thrones, people complain about some of the episodes being too dark. But yeah, so it was more of just a show I watched in the background while I did stuff. It wasn't something I made an appointment to watch, alone with the audio way up and stuff. Finished Preacher. So did you ever watch any of that?
No.
It's all on Hulu now, all the show. It's 4 seasons. Season 4 I just remember people talking about had an episode that was one of the wildest things of the year. And I watched it and I was like, it kind of was. Because the show is basically the preacher, Jesse Custer, an angel and a demon sleep together, and then their child is called Genesis, which is essentially the voice of God. So anybody that has it, whatever they say, people do. So he gets it because he's just the proper balance of like good and bad. And then it's just, they find out that God's missing from heaven. So it's him going on a road trip trying to find God. And then,
that's cool.
So it's kind of like the overall premise for it. The first season is kind of a prequel to that. And then there's a killer called the Saint of Killers that they get out of hell to try to stop him, who's very powerful and unstoppable. So it's all that. And then this new season does have their representation of God in it. So this is a show where it's not going to be very popular in the Bible Belt, because it depicts like God and Jesus and Satan and Hitler and stuff. But like one of the things that was the controversial or the most crazy opening was God and why he destroyed the dinosaurs. And you can search on YouTube if you just want to watch that. But that was kind of crazy.
I might watch this show one day. I was interested. Seth Rogen and did Evan Goldberg, did both of them produce it?
I believe. I know Seth Rogen did.
Yeah, Rogen, yeah. I kept like almost watching that when it was premiering, and then I think I just got busy and I never did because I was definitely interested in it.
Well, because in 2, they had some of the creative team from Breaking Bad come over, I think, like the directors of photography or something. If I remember correctly, who worked on Breaking Bad. So kind of like really striking visuals, like big, wide open landscapes and kind of these arid places. So there's, cool visuals. I think that the seasons did kind of drag on a little bit. They took story that could have been more compacted and drug it out to 10 episodes. Because like season 4, they could have cut a good chunk of that material and been fine. But when you binge it all, when you're watching it, you don't have to wait week to week. That kind of isn't as big of a deal, aside from just the time invested. But the final episodes, like it did get to some interesting places and do stuff that was entertaining. And just the kind of craziness that's in there throughout was entertaining. Not really like my top tier of shows. Like I thought it was interesting. I thought it was good. But it didn't reach like my, Better Call Saul tier. Or I'm trying to think of like the other stuff that's still airing in terms of like dramas. But and finished What We Do in the Shadows season 2.
Yeah,
that was very hilarious. The season really knocked it out of the park.
Jumped back into that. I liked it the first season. I watched some of that and I liked it. It's a hard time because we watch that together, so it's very
Yeah.
hard to watch shows.
I think like season 2 really sings. Like each episode is distinct and does something fun. And there's a few episodes that are just great. So that's something like, or I definitely recommend getting through to it, because season 1 does some setup. You need to kind of watch season 2 to understand some of it. But season 2 is just hilarious and a lot of fun.
I'll see if Nicole's okay with me just jumping ahead and watching it without her. I mean, she enjoyed it when she saw, and that's why we slowed down, because we were going to watch it together. But we have so many shows we're trying to watch together, and we're
the only
not doing a very good job.
I guess it's saving grace is it's a 30-minute network show, so it really means it's about 22 minutes, I think, without commercials.
Yeah, but I watch it on Hulu, so
yeah,
it's got
then it has the commercials that pan
unless
out.
I pay for it, I don't want to pay. Yeah.
But I remember for a while my Hulu was doing a thing where if it was on the computer, it would just goof up and skip the ads. So it would only take about 1 minute to play all of the ads throughout the course of a show, but it no longer does that.
Do you watch anything else? Is that pretty much?
I remember. I think that was. I mean, I played some like video games, but yeah, like that was the main stuff. Like watching Preacher and then like of course The Vast of Night is one I would recommend. Preacher's more of like, it's a TV series. It has 4 seasons, so there's a little bit more material to dig into there. And it's just one of those things where if you really like the style of the first season, then it's worth going through. But if you're not really digging,
does it have the vibe of a Western?
It's got a lot of Western tropes, but then they end up in like New Orleans for a chunk of it. And they kind of go into like voodoo and so it's got like Western tropes in terms of visuals, kind of like Breaking Bad did, where you have like these kind of striking visuals that are Western-esque. But then, they have some like crime caper type stuff. And then it goes to some of the heaven and hell stuff, which is a little bit wacky at times. It's kind of hard to find like a show that I would say was really similar to it that I'll compare it to. But it was, based on the graphic novels, which I think it diverged from quite a bit. But like I enjoyed it, like the visuals and just all that stuff drove it for me. Like the performances are good, and I like the actors and stuff. But like the story wasn't really what grabbed me. But I enjoyed watching. I'm glad they made it. So it's all on Hulu. So
yeah, I might check that out one day. Something else new I watched again. This is something we could watch with my daughter, was Sonic, the Sonic movie, because it was like on sale. It was on sale to buy, and Jim Carrey, I'm always down to see him. And yeah, he was very entertaining in it. Like it was still a kid's movie, and he's not the lead actor. So you feel like, but every scene he really like
tried.
He went to town. Yeah. I mean, he really put everything into it. I feel like he definitely gave plenty of suggestions, and I don't know if they were suggestions, but I'm assuming he brought some of his own ideas to it, and everyone landed. That every scene he's in, I think, lands. But he's not the lead, so you know what I mean. Like, and James Marsden's fine; it's great. And the Sonic way they developed, I guess, that character. Obviously they're changing him a little bit for this film, but that was fine, funny enough, whatever for a kids movie. Not really annoying. He does that. What the hell's that damn Fortnite dance?
Oh yeah, or the floss.
Yeah, he flosses. There's a couple points that you have to just grit your teeth and get through. But
so it's more DreamWorks and less Pixar in terms of going for some low-hanging pop culture fruit.
A little bit, but yeah, okay, yeah. More DreamWorks.
And James Marsden, because he's also in Hop, I think, and he's like in some others. So he's made a like little living here at this point in his career, doing animated movies for families.
Yeah, we watched Hop last Easter or something. I watched that once or twice. But yeah, it was fine. They have a little teaser for a sequel, and they've announced one and stuff. So we'll watch that. Thankfully, it seems like Jim Carrey, he sets up that. Seems like he's down for a sequel, maybe, because if he's out, I will be way less enthusiastic about watching a sequel. Because my daughter, she liked it, but she has not asked to watch it again,
Yeah.
I watched the Netflix documentary on LA, the LA riots, LA 92. If you haven't not watched anything on that, it's not a bad one. It more or less plays out a lot of the footage and it gives you a timeline of events, but it kind of lets the footage do a lot of the speaking. I was hoping for more, honestly, or maybe a different type of documentary for this, only because I've seen so much of that footage before. You know, like there's been plenty of stuff on TV. Just growing up, you know, it's born in '85. We have came across footage of that on TV.
Well, and that can, because like the Rodney King stuff and all that contextualizes the O.J. Simpson trial to an extent in the time period. So you see a lot of that when you watch stuff about OJ, because that was like the big story of the 90s. And then in recent years, they had the documentary series on, wasn't ESPN had the OJ series, and then there was the Ryan Murphy American Crime Story series about OJ. So all that's been back in the news. And then of course with the social unrest and all the stuff around police and stuff now, that ties back into that definitely. And, you know, you see things repeat itself over and over time. But yeah,
yeah. So, you know, it was good, but some of it, you need the images if you haven't seen them before and the context. But for me, I was hoping a new spin on it. This is more of an unfiltered look. You know, it has its perspectives, but you know, sometimes you watch that stuff and it feels like you're watching riot porn, you know, and after a while you're like, I'm wanting to learn more, but I'm just sitting here watching these terrible things and I've seen them before, you know what I mean? Well, like I've been exposed to them and some of them haven't left my mind. And
it's really easy to take it out of context and make a statement that's contrary to reality or what, you know, what happened. So
yeah, there was some TV series I think that had it was a docu-series. I think it had multiple episodes, and I think it had some rappers that were contextualizing it, and I can't remember what station it was. And honestly, I didn't see anybody on the credits, so I thought this probably isn't it. But I was like hoping to find that somewhere, and I don't even know the name of it. But yeah, if you haven't seen anything on it, if you're younger and didn't come across the multitude of coverage of this in the 90s, you know, watch something on it, and just because it is, you know, what we're living in right now.
Well, yeah, it's just understanding the context of this country.
Yeah, yeah. I watched the Agnes Varda documentary, Black Panthers, from '68, and for me, like whenever I heard Black Panthers in the 90s, a lot of times, most of the time, it was from white people, and it was in the context of them being a little overboard, violent militants. You know, that was what I had heard of the perspective of the Black Panthers. Then I heard more as I grew up, and even like, you know, didn't Forrest Gump? I don't remember how Forrest Gump portrays them, but I feel like it aligns them a little bit better. I feel like when I saw Forrest Gump, I was like, "Oh, okay, yeah, Black Panthers, all right, yeah, they're not maybe exactly everything I heard."
Well, a lot of the discussion,
and let me say one thing: this wasn't from my parents. My parents never went on any rants or anything, but you know.
Well, I think a lot of the context was describing them as more of a domestic terrorist organization, versus what it actually was. And unfortunately, that's the way a lot of things, like depending on the eras of because you know everybody's canceling stuff now, and TV shows are pulling episodes or pulling, you know, things from the past, and then it's like, so what do you do? Because like I think what was it? The Office pulled an episode because it had a character in blackface, kind of. Community pulled an episode that had a character that was actually supposed to, like, he was dressed up like a black elf because it was the Dungeons and Dragons episode. But in the episode itself, a character who's black mentioned something about it. We're not going to mention this hate crime. So I guess they contextualized and thought, well, that was on the edge. So they took that out. And it was like The Simpsons isn't going to have non-white characters voiced by white voice actors anymore.
And the Golden Girls episode where they have like
face
mud, the mud or whatever on their face. It's, you know, and somebody said, look, this is that episode about accepting an interracial relationship because, you know, I don't know if it's who brings home a black boyfriend or whatever, and they show up in that. So yeah, there's like a little bit of humor in that. But
so like my thing is,
they were erasing all that aspect that is progressive, especially for that time. You know, in case of
my thing is like so. And once again, if I'm not the person who's impacted or affected by those depictions, I just can only provide like my unimportant viewpoint of like things like that. But my thing is, so what do you do on? So there's very blatant examples of things like that where you can go in and say, okay, this episode has this, it's gone. That's easy. What do you do about series that as an overall depict things inaccurately or have systematically racist depictions that aren't, you know, something that's, you know, as transparent as blackface or something that's obvious? It's more of a, you know, subversive thing where throughout it's just the language paints people in an inaccurate way. Like, what do you do about that?
Well, they just gloss over it because it isn't a specific thing. You know, somebody also said, you know, Tina Fey's comment, her response, her thing was like, I didn't want to see another little, and people have their own problems with her and how the depictions of, you know, transgender or whatever. Me and you talked about this, but this is why we were playing a game streaming. But she basically said, I don't want to see another little girl or young person that wants to write comedy see this on my episode and then run with it and maybe, you know, are make the same thing off this because they think it's okay. And I get that. I can sympathize with that. And I think I would be the same boat, even if I'm not going to write anything with blackface to preface, but say I did something that could have been, you know, seen as not appropriate under the right context. Yeah, I would never want that to be misconstrued. Yeah, for a younger person to go. So I totally get that. But somebody said they think part of this is people just basically protecting their brands more than anything. You know? Yeah,
well, there's a lot of corporate cleanup versus you know, like in the horror world, like at least horror
front facing changes. You know,
it's not going in and saying we're gonna remove all these horror films from our streaming catalog where the black character dies first, or there's unfair treatment to the LGBTQ characters and stuff like that. It's more of there's these very overt things people can point to as a gotcha. We're going to remove that proactively so nobody can come after us for it. It's not really saying. I mean, a lot of times too, there's the argument, you know, stuff exists in the context it existed. Just because it's ugly, you don't necessarily need, if it's not at the forefront of culture pushing things. But then there's also how much stuff is destructive to people's views on things, and there's a lot of messy stuff. There's no good answer.
The approach they're doing with Gone to Win, with having some commentary and contextualize it, like I think that would give, unless it is an egregious, you know, use of anything super offensive like that there are people vocally like this is harmful. I think some of that stuff they maybe need to look at again, like the Golden Girls thing, and if they want to do the same thing, like recontextualize, have a bumper at the beginning saying, hey, look, we just want to be clear there was no, ill intent with this. Again, if people are upset, I can't say the ones that if they are or not.
Well, too, like no one person, like if you have somebody in the writer's room that's not white, they don't speak for everybody in the same way that nobody speaks for an entire group of people. So it's a tough thing to figure out.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and then I also watched, let's see here. Oh, that Black Panthers documentary. Sorry. That also is almost like the LA Riots one, where there's a little bit of narration and contextualizing what's going on, but a lot of this is letting people speak. So they'll show a lot of footage, and then, which I think some of the same footage they may have used in The Five Bloods, funny enough, because I can't remember which one I watched first, but I was like, some of those same shots I think were in there. But it is a lot of people speaking to the camera and just speaking to whoever is the interviewer, and it's maybe like 36 minutes. It isn't, again, it's not a deep dive. There's light narration, But it is, yeah, it's another good, it's always good to learn, and she's a phenomenal filmmaker. The only other film of hers I've seen is Vagabond, which that also is very, that is about a young vagrant, young homeless person that is very much dealing with major societal issues, and she's an imperfect person. I might have talked about this on the podcast before, but that's also on the Criterion, or it was, and that's a phenomenal film. So I had been meaning to dig more into her stuff, and I almost started Black Panther several times because it was half hour, but I'm like, oh, that's a documentary. I want to see more of her narrative stuff. But that was kind of going back and forth, and I had a little bit of time the other day, and it was a half hour, so I watched that. And then, I just kind of rewatched some old stuff, Empire Records, watched the longer cut of that. Nicole had never seen that film. House Party 1 and 2. I think a couple of them were I always look for them to be on sale, and one of them was pretty cheap. The second one was pretty cheap, I think, and they were cheaper on iTunes, but they were like those movies anywhere. I watched those as a kid, and then probably in college, I got on the kick, and I saw one or watched it, and I'm like, oh man, I forgot I love these movies. So then I watched the 2, and then I watched Class Act. So I also bought Class Act, but I haven't watched that again. That's not the best one of those at all by far, but they're almost like hangout movies. They're heavy on the comedy, but 1 and Class Act from what I remember, but 2 actually deals with kid is going to college, and so it deals a lot with I guess the Black experience at college.
Yeah.
I would say at that time, but it's and it is, yeah, it's good. I like the things that it touches on. That it's not over. I'm not saying overbearing is bad, but it is not just hokey or preachy in the wrong ways. It is all, yeah.
Because a lot of stuff,
those movies are just fun too. But 1 ends on a very homophobic rap in jail about jail rape. That's sort of the climax, towards the climax of that film. That that 2 thankfully avoids most of that badly dated.
Because there is weird stuff. I was listening to some NWA recently in the past few weeks. I was like, oh man, I forgot about how kind of homophobic, rap or a lot of metal, a lot of things were in the 90s and late 80s. It's like, oh, you kind of forget about that. So then it's just kind of, once again, not a part of the community that would be affected. So
things have changed a lot since we were kids.
Yeah,
they have changed a lot for the better. Hey, dude, keep going. I understand that sometimes things may go too far one direction because of misguided.
Well, I think too, something that's changed is doing stuff like this podcast. 10 years ago, 2010, people had YouTube channels, and some YouTubers who got in trouble and stuff recently, they would do anything they could just to get a laugh or a rise out of people, or to make content that they thought was interesting or funny or edgy. And then it's some of it didn't age too well. And I don't know how nobody was upset about this before, because there's some stuff making a bunch of, jokes that insinuate pedophilia, or a lot of, racism and a lot of this stuff. I was like, I don't understand how this stuff passed muster back then, much less, this person. There's a lot of people.
It's comedian. I think it comes from comedians that know how to, they know how to tell a joke. They know what they can get away with.
But these are people
that. Well, I know, that's what I'm saying. They know how to use words and contextualize and shock, but then make it okay by the end of it, whatever. They see those and they take the wrong aspect of it, and they just go for the shock part, and they have no other basis for it. And it's no, that's not okay. It's
somebody watches Blazing Saddles, and they take a scene from that and do it, recreate it verbatim, but without the understanding or the context, and make it very, very bad because they don't have the underlying message.
I'm that's the only, in all these terrible, everything terrible going on. That's the only bright spot, is to see so many people pushing for change. And you see, again, some stuff is some not everybody speaks for everybody, but it's like, look, we're not asking for this one episode of Golden Girls or, Black Lives Matter to be painted on this one street. We want, we want to defund the police, or we want, systematic change or whatever. And yeah, I hope more of that keeps happening. And also too, creators are more conscious of.
Well, and two, I think a lot of it's just making a lot of the actual decision makers be more diverse, because you see experiences of people who are the only non-white person or the only non-male person in a writer's room for a show or movie or something. And their experience is kind of, they're the token person that's there to give tacit approval for whatever comes out of it without having any real ability to influence what's going on. And having
that's what Donald Glover got hired on 30 Rock, he said, because he was free, basically, because of this grant, like internally, as a diversity hire. So Tina Fey said, I hired you because you were free, essentially. But he says, like, I believe he said something like, she valued his opinion and whatever, and he got to work, and it was like a great start for him. But I think there was also, everything wasn't perfectly smooth. And again, I don't know, but I read a little bit about that stuff, because I think 30 Rock is like a wonderfully written show. And I'm talking about from the craft's point of view. I know some people don't like the perspectives on humor, but I think the craft is also too why I rewatch it sometimes, just because I like to see how that show works, Well,
and two, then you watch stuff where like Donald Glover went from being, his early sketch comedy days, like with Derek Comedy. I know I'd watched Mystery Team that he was on, which is like the early movie that he made.
Yeah, I watched that too, before Community and before all that. Yeah.
And then he was on that, and then you're like a writer on 30 Rock, and then on Community, and then you see why now he may be more interested in doing his own projects, like Atlanta, where he has control, and they have control over who the writers are. And,
well, I believe I believe he said the head said that he couldn't say the N-word on his show, or at least the only person that was allowed to say N-word was like one white person during a certain situation. If I was reading that article correctly, it was like jumping from a couple different topics, Yeah. But again, he doesn't have carte blanche to do whatever he wants. But thankfully, it seems like Atlanta, he has a lot of creative control versus, what some people do. And thankfully, FX, whether, they have some restrictions and whatever, hopefully keep pushing for those. But I recently watched season 2 because somebody, I'd been meaning to, but somebody asked me about a script to show somebody. This was before a lot of the protests happened. Before any of the protests happened, it was just COVID, I think. But he went up my feedback or whatever. He was a producer that worked on the short I worked on for the what is the movie called?
13 Slaves Till Christmas.
13 Slaves Till Christmas. Yeah. So he was like, he was kicking around that pilot, I think a while back, because he talked about it on the set when I was meeting with him before. He said his influence to Atlanta and a few other things. So I decided to dig through that. That second season of Atlanta is very good. I like how each episode of that also has a very strong premise. I don't know what people's opinions are on that, because I have not read reviews of that show or series. And I like season 1. It felt much looser, and it felt like it tried to be more of an experience of, what they were trying to provide. Where season 2 feels like they've really starting to hit their strides and are having fun with the premise of each episode. Yeah. And you could still provide an experience, but you kind of recontextualize it in a, you send a message in a less direct way, maybe. But also there's a lot more opportunities for comedic situations or just premises, I think. Like the college episode, where they go play the pajama. Actually, when I watched that made me want to rewatch House Party 2, because it's the Pajama Jam. When I watched that, I'm like, I need to watch House Party. That led me down that path of rewatching those films. But yeah, they go that, and they go to the fraternity to smoke weed, and they have the giant rebel flag behind them, and and the gun collection. Like I love that. That show's very good. And you know me, I drop off shows a lot, but
and then the Teddy Perkins episode, that could be its own horror movie.
Yeah, that was Lakeitha. I had a dream. I had a dream after watching most of that series that I met him, and I was just able to tell him, and I was like, in my dream, I told him he was like one of my favorite actors right now, and I would watch him in anything. Have you seen? Did you ever watch the Boots Radley film? Sorry to bother you.
No, I keep meaning to, and I keep forgetting.
Yeah, that also very specifically, even now, it's as time moves forward, it's a strong anti-capitalist message as well. Not just race and capitalism are locked in like this, but that film, you definitely need to watch that. It's on Hulu. It's funny. It's entertaining. It's got a strong message. Yeah, definitely worth a watch. Highly if I'm going to recommend anything to anybody this week, you can watch The Five Bloods. Yes, watch that. But sorry to bother you. That film is shocking in the best ways. Yeah, and that's probably about it on my end. Other than I watched it. Did I talk about watching The Trip to Greece?
No,
I don't know if the Trip films. I don't know. I watched that. That's great. That was just during COVID, but yeah. So,
all right, let's see. Yeah. So, I guess that's all we're gonna talk about the movie stuff. So you can always find everything we're doing at housemoviestore.com or hbtvs.com. You can find their social media accounts on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter. So we haven't been super active on there just because we haven't had as much stuff going on and during the middle of a lot of more important things. I really wasn't sure what to post. Because some people just kind of chugged right along, like, here's a picture of Freddie and Michael. Who's going to win the fight? But
and two, we're not super active on those anyway. So my thought was like, I'm full support of Black Lives Matter, but my thought was like, there doesn't need to be more noise in the void of some random ass post from us. Like, this isn't our lifeblood. Some people need to depend on it for their, to survive. I get it. This is some people's jobs and whatever. They've got to post, they've got to get subscribers, they got to keep moving along, but we don't need to. So it was fine. We just be silent for a bit and pop in and out.
Yeah, I mean,
but thank you for everybody who's subscribed and watching. There's people in the chat thanking us for our content and stuff. We really appreciate that. And
yeah, I mean, I plan to try to. Yeah, I'm hoping to get some new stuff in the works because get some more videos out there just to get some creative projects to stay sane as there's nothing to do. And then, like we said, like the Project 13 Slaves Till Christmas, it's still tentatively penciled in to be this year. So. We'll see how that goes.
Yeah, we were like two people. There's only 2 or 3 segments that shot. COVID hit with a vengeance, and they were about to start back up. But now that we have these bigger waves coming again because people aren't wearing masks and stuff, we'll see.
I mean, personally, like, as I thought about making some shorts, and my idea was since I live with Julie, obviously she can be in it, and then. If we socially distance and have somebody that can be on set that we never actually have to be that close to, we can just rehearse digitally or whatever. Like maybe I could do something like that, but I wouldn't really feel comfortable being on a set with as many people as you had in your segment, like all in the house. And or like even on the one that I made, there was still 5-6 people in the house. Like, and it's just because you don't know like. Who has to interact with people that have compromised immune systems or pre-existing conditions?
Yeah, and when people aren't getting paid for it because we can't, this is it was a non-paid thing. Like, yeah, if they can't get paid for it, then why would they risk their life for?
Yeah, so it's one of those things where if I make anything, it'll be stuff where it's safe and I don't have to put anybody at risk and all that. But yeah, so. But there's other stuff we can work on. There's other videos I kind of want to get back to doing, like the Ghost of Kentucky stuff or Kentuckiana, where it's just kind of going to historical places. Because I don't know, I kind of think that some of the urban legend stuff's a bit cheesy. It's maybe better to focus a little more on the historical stuff. Because I did that one on that Rose Island place that people seem to like, at least on Facebook. So maybe try and do some more stuff like that. Kind of go to historical places that have interesting history about them. Just get video of it. Try to do something because I plan to do that this summer anyway, but then all the COVID stuff hit and some of the places obviously you won't be able to go inside of right now. But yeah, you can find all this stuff on hbtvs.com. Keep up with all the projects. See, and Derek's not on here, but he has a new account on Instagram you can hit up. It's Meta World Toys. So it's METTAWORLD_toys. And it's where he has a bunch of figure stuff where he gets like different figures, like I think he's like Mortal Kombat and X-Men and Dragon Ball Z and post stuff from it. So you can check that out, which is pretty cool. Yeah, so everything's hbtvs.com. I'm not sure if we're going to do another episode like turn around next week because we're releasing this one. It'll be coming out on like the 30th of June. So I don't know. We're going to have another episode like this first week of July, and there's all the holiday stuff. But
maybe we'll see. Well, you know,
yeah, keep an eye on the social media accounts, and we'll update anything we're going to do.
Yeah, I'll see if I can. I'm seeing if I can share my screen to. Oh yeah, I got Derek's thing pulled up. Hopefully, it doesn't pull up the wrong stuff. Yeah, like Ted Cruz, right? Or somebody had a tab open. Let's see here. Making sure there's no passwords or anything up. There we go.
Yeah.
There's his Instagram page. Can you see that there, William?
Let's see. Yes.
Okay, yeah, that's his new. He's got a nice little backdrop there. Of course, a lot of Dragon Ball Z, Mortal Kombat. Yeah. So anyway, that's his new project now that he is not working and at home.
Yeah. Yeah. So you can check that out, and yeah, and then. Yeah, like I said, so we'll try to get some more stuff out through the HBTVS stuff. I posted stories off and on, but yeah, try and get back to posting stuff regularly. Yeah, so I guess that'll wrap up this episode of the House of Ozark podcast. Thanks for listening. I ended the stream.